think of the U.S. bombing Iran through the stock market lens. Futures right now are pretty much unchanged. We've been up and down throughout the morning. You can see arrows are green, so that shows a level of calm that you may not have expected on Saturday night. Ring the opening bell down the NYSE is Amrise, which is a company that is spun off from the German cement maker Holcim. Down on the NASDAQ, look at that, Max Siegel there, former Bloomberg producer. Now he runs the Node ETF, actively managed digital assets, and they are celebrating their, I guess, Web3 digital assets campaign there at VanEck. So that guy used to be my producer. There you go. It's a small world out there. Let's take a look at the cross-asset moves, though. After that escalation that we saw this weekend, you can see the S&P 500, it was much lower pre-market, down about 1% overnight. Then it was higher. Now it's pretty much unchanged as the bell rings. You can see we're hanging out below 6,000. We'll watch how that trade develops. And a lot of that depends on oil. What happens with oil prices? That is what we've been hearing all morning. You can see not much is happening right now with crude prices up just about 0.3%. Of course, we know that traders across markets right now are awaiting the response from Iran. This is one of the markets you want to keep an eye on. So too is the bond market, the 10-year treasury yield, a little bit lower right now. Perhaps some of that haven bid coming in, pushing the 10-year yield down about 3 basis points. But again, the message, Matt, is muted moves overall. Yeah, absolutely. I'm watching oil, defense, airlines. You can see the moves that you would expect, just not in the size that maybe you would have guessed on Saturday night. ExxonMobil is up, but just 1%. Lockheed Martin gaining just about 0.5%. United Airlines down 2%. That's a bigger move as we get into the cash trade. But we are back with Lazard, Chief Market Strategist Ron Temple. And Ron, what you were saying before the break is we still don't know Iran's response. And pretty much everything in terms of the equity market, treasuries, oil, I mean, all the assets that you cover, those moves depend on Iran's response. So until we get that, right, you know, it's anyone's guess.
No, I think it's going to be days, potentially weeks before we know how the Iranian regime responds. I mean, clearly they've been taken offside in many ways. I mean, it's been surprising how effective the Israeli attacks have been, how amazing, it's frankly incredible how good the Israeli intelligence was in terms of knowing where to strike and having people internally. So I think for Iran, there's probably a destabilization of just trying to get their footing again. But it seems highly likely you're going to get a response. Very unlikely that, as you read, the former Ayatollah Khomeini basically talked about drinking from the poison chalice and agreeing to peace with Iraq many years ago. Hard to believe that Khomeini is going to do the same thing without some response to restore some domestic credibility. So,
hello, this is DrPaulCottrell. I am doing a live stream on Rumble and on YouTube and on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I'll be setting up X Spaces as a simulcast for today. I'm not doing the whole mic thing because I want to do the simulcast with X Spaces. But thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. But what's very important to understand is how it is that the United States needs to make a very strong stance and hold the line and make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon and don't fall into the the never war fallacy, all right, that's happening in the MAGA movement. See, the MAGA movement is fracturing a little bit. So you got Steve Bannon and Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson. What they want to do is convince you that every war in the Middle East means a forever war. Wrong. That's a comparison fallacy. In addition, Iran's theocratic regime cannot have a nuclear weapon no matter what. No matter what. So when you have people like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones saying, don't get in, don't get involved, blah, 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 that it might cause some terrorism in our homeland, or it may, cause the Strait of Hormuz to be blocked up and oil is going to skyrocket and all that. Right now, oil's trading at $74.25, by the way. But the thing is that sometimes you just got to get the job done, hold the line, and just make sure that you do the right thing instead of being a fucking pacifist. And I'm so fucking sick and tired of Americans being a pacifist. And the same thing happened during the crisis of 2020. You had a bunch of people that were a bunch of pacifists that weren't willing to hold the line, be on the battlefield, and shut down the fucking bioweapon program. And the same goddamn fucking thing is happening right now within these pacifists that they call themselves MAGA. You know, guess what? Stephen Bannon still can't get what happened during the 2020 crisis right. How many thousands of fucking hours has he interviewed people, and he still can't say USACCP virus? Now he's gonna tell you that, oh, going into Iran is gonna be, you know, a free for all, and that America's gonna lose out, and it's gonna be, you know, a never ending war. I don't think so, Bannon. Dr. Paul Cottrell doesn't think you're correct. Now, let's talk about Alex Jones. Alex Jones, really? You really think that he's going to tell you how it is? That we should be a pacifist? That we should let the Ayatollah fucking end up having a nuclear weapon? Are you fucking insane? But we have a lot of people out there. We have a lot of people in the United States that are a pacifist. And then inside that, there's a lot of anti-Semitism. There's a lot of, you know, almost anti-Americanism. See, it sounds kind of paradoxical. America first, but they're willing to, they're willing. These types that I'm talking about within the MAGA movement, they're so far to the right, they're actually left. And some of the left is so far to the left that they're actually right in terms of the political spectrum. So these fringe groups that are ultra fringe end up causing problems in governance. Look at what happened with Gates. Look at what's happening now with the bill for the tax bill. It's being held up because of SALT. Really? Really? Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones are wrong. They're just wrong. Why are they wrong? Well, we went into Iraq and Afghanistan right after 9/11 under false pretenses. So that was the reason why it was a quagmire. Because we were cursed. The United States was cursed during our engagement in the Middle East right after 9/11. Because we were there under false pretenses. But knocking out the Ayatollah and the nuclear capability of Iran is not false pretenses. So therefore, that's why the operation was successful. But Stephen Bannon knows better. Really? Stephen Bannon was a naval officer or a navigator during the Cold War. Spent time in the Pacific. Thank you for your service, Bannon. But the thing is that you need to have Iran in the orbit of the United States to be able to circumvent the oil so it doesn't go to China when we have a fucking war with them because of Taiwan. But he knows better. Let's continue. Oh, by the way, if you like my content, please subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Where else are you going to get such enlightening conversation? In addition, you can follow me on X or on GETTR. And please help support the work that I do by going to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. Or you can be a paid member to my Patreon channel. I do all of this for free. All of it for free. And not only that, I'm telling you how to make money in the market. Stephen Bannon doesn't tell you that. Stephen Bannon tells you how to be a fucking pacifist. Get on the field.
Ron Temple, he is Lazard's chief market strategist. Let's go check on this market right now. We're just about 10 minutes into the U.S. trading day on this Monday, following a very eventful weekend. You do have the S&P 500 marginally higher right now, to the tune of about 0.1%. You do have 300 names in the green. You wouldn't necessarily know that by looking at these small moves overall. I do want to call out some names here. Up at the top, you do have Tesla as your biggest gainer in the S&P 500 right now. They had that robo-taxi launch over the weekend. It went relatively smoothly, and you can see that shareholders rewarding that. Eli Lilly higher by about 3.6%. We got news that Novo is
Alex Jones said that there's going to be the oil's going to skyrocket to the moon. We're going to have Armageddon.
Well, when I woke up, there wasn't Armageddon outside, and oil is trading below $74 a barrel.
Take a look at the percent, but still, when you're talking about the world's biggest companies, it adds up. And this is what you're going to see when we take a look at the sectors as well. You do have more green than red, but at the bottom, you can see we have tech, we have communication services. At the top, utilities, energy, real estate, consumer staples, a really interesting makeup on this Monday, Matt Miller.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating reaction, and maybe not exactly what you would have expected. So fascinating, I think, to see crude down right now. Whether you're looking at WTI or Brent crude, we are seeing red arrows there. But could we see in the near to mid-term $130 a barrel? We'll look at what could happen if Iran chokes supply by closing the Strait of Hormuz next. This is Open Interest.
Okay, we're live streaming now on X Spaces. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And guess what? Don't smell like Alex Jones. Use my structural nano silver soaps. Get lavender and peppermint. And I also have two other versions of this, charcoal tea tree and lemongrass. Get a few bars for your household. They're very high quality soaps. And please, don't smell like Alex Jones. All right, so let's talk about the market right now. The oil market is trading at 73.46 right now. BITO is trading at 20.40. There's going to be, all right, let's talk about resistance levels for the oil market. So the resistance level for oil is at $80 a barrel right now. And 72.95 is the support level. So we're going to test 72.95. If it goes below 72.95, then 72.95 will be the resistance level. And then we are going to have a support level at about 65 would be the next support level. So let's see what happens with the futures contract in WTI oil and see how it tests the 72.95. It's at 72.60 right now. We might test it today, maybe tomorrow, just depends. Now, when you looked at the Asian session as it was trading, it seemed like almost muted. Right when the market opened it up, oil went to 78 and then radically went down and kind of hovered at about 75. And then when the European session came online, it started to eventually drift down to 74 and now we're in the 73 range. All right. Now, that's oil. Now, WTI, that's WTI. BITO is the ETF for Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is trading at now 102. There were a lot of people last week that started putting in put options. They were buying put options, all right? So there was interest in put options. So that would mean that the trading community last week was betting that Bitcoin would go below 100,000, all right? During the weekend trading, Bitcoin did go to 99, all right? But started to inch back up during the Asian session. Now we're trading at 102. So BITO is rallying in the open right now. And it's trading at about 20.425. So we have a resistance level for WTI. Not WTI, BITO, I'm sorry. It's been I had a long show last night with John Hogue. Hopefully you saw it. All right, so BITO resistance level is going to be 21.48. Support level is at 20 right now. All right. So that would mean that for us to get past the 21.48, we need to start seeing Bitcoin at about 105, roughly 104. So probably 105 closer to 105. All right. So that's what's happening there. The S&P 500. The S&P 500 is trading at 5,980. All right. Resistance level 6,000. Support level 5,750. All right. This we haven't went past this the 6,000 mark and maintained that as a support level because it's been bouncing back and forth between a support level and a resistance level. So it's kind of we're testing this. All right. It's kind of consolidating. It's testing and testing and testing. We're eventually going to go beyond that. Now, this strike on Iran definitely slowed things down with the equity market, but I still hold that in July, by the end of July, that we are going to be at an all-time high, but most likely just barely an all-time high. Now, an all-time high would mean 6,130, over 6,130. Now, we're not that far away. If we get positive news with tariffs, with the tax bill, which is supposed to pass through July 4th, but that might be delayed, and what happens with Iran. So that's some of the risks with the equity market. So stay tuned, all right? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the products that I offer. Don't look like an Alex Jones because my protocol works. Obviously, his supplements don't because he takes them and he looks like he's like 150 years older than I am, all right? So I just, follow my protocol. It works. Please go to my store. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's listen in with Bloomberg about the Strait of Hormuz.
And I think that if we do get a price spike, and I'm not in the position to speculate how high that might go, but what I can say is I think it would be short-lived, because I think that the moment you get threats to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, you get a very swift and very sharp military response from the US. They've got two, or will soon have two carrier groups in the region. And I think that there will be a very swift response. I think you will see the release of strategic stockpiles, if necessary, in consuming countries. And I think that will help to bring the price back down fairly quickly. But I agree that this is probably the least likely scenario in terms of what actually happens in and around Hormuz.
And Dina, we've been marveling at the fact that you're not seeing too much movement when it comes to Brent this morning. There was an interesting quote from Bob McNally overnight speaking on Bloomberg Television. He, of course, is a former White House energy official. He said that we are up $10 a barrel since the war started, now a little more. And so I think there is an appropriate amount of risk in the market. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, whether $10 is an appropriate risk premium to build in.
No one knows.
It does appear, though, since this entire conflict has started, that oil has been relatively stable. So I would argue that, yes, that risk seems to be priced in. Obviously, all bets are off if things like the Straits of Hormuz are closed for a while, especially if that lasts. I do agree that it's likely to be short-lived because the U.S. would step in and ensure that they are reopened. But Iran is able to pose a threat. It's able to slow down shipping. It's able to harass ships. And that might mean that we find ourselves in the type of scenario that we found ourselves with the Houthis in the Red Sea, where it just becomes too problematic for shipping to go through those routes.
Dina, you have a lot of experience analyzing this region, and I wonder what your take is on whether or not we've crossed the Rubicon with this attack, U.S. attack on Iran. I was talking with Peter Cheer earlier from Academy Securities, and he thinks it's highly likely that the U.S. Now has no choice but to be drawn into a protracted conflict, to continue military involvement as Iran is so likely to pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. What's your view?
Well, certainly this attack doesn't enable the US to just say, I'm done with the Middle East, let me turn to Asia. It does, in fact, the exact opposite. The one thing that I will say, though, is that Iran is not keen to escalate this very far because it knows that
people need to understand the pivot to Asia was opening up the door for oil to just flow right in to China. Think about what Obama's peace plan with Iran was. Here's a $150 billion check. Just tell us that you're not enriching uranium for a bomb. And, oh, by the way, we're going to pivot to Asia. Oil just kept on flowing to China. But if you destroy the nuclear capability of Iran, decapitate the Ayatollah, literally, not figuratively, literally, all right, and you bring in Iran into the economic orbit of the Western powers, then what happens is you chokehold the supply to China. So there is no such thing as pivot to Asia. You got to be engaged in both areas. Barack Obama's pivot to Asia was like, well, let's stop paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East because of the quagmire. Because at that time, remember, we still had problems with Iraq and Afghanistan. Why? Because we weren't blessed. Why? Because we went in there under false pretenses. This whole Iranian thing is totally different. Totally different. Now, if they want to escalate this, they're going to be blown away. I mean, the United States military prowess in that region, the Ayatollah is hiding because the Israelis are hunting him down like a dog. Amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing how stupid some of these newscasters are. All right, let's listen in to Al Jazeera here. Oh wait, I want to listen into live now.
Also want to remind you that coming up here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, that is when President Trump is expected to again convene his National Security Council. And
another thing that people don't realize, MBS and Trump get along. I'm sure MBS is on the speed dial for Trump and vice versa. So let's just imagine oil prices start to go up. Ring, 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 ring. Hey, MBS, this is Trump. Bring down the oil prices. I need your help. Yes, Mr. President. Ding. But Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon think they know better.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth calling the strikes, quote, an incredible and overwhelming success. President Trump does say those sites were essentially obliterated and Iran's nuclear program has been destroyed. The commander-in-chief warned of additional strikes if Tehran does try to retaliate against U.S. forces. However, Iran's top general has said that the U.S. strikes gave Tehran a, quote, free hand to act against the U.S. and its military. Iran's foreign minister is in Russia as we speak, meeting with President Putin to talk about the U.S. strikes. Russia's former leader actually took to X just yesterday to say that other countries would be willing to provide nuclear weapons to Iran following those strikes. Putin has not publicly echoed those remarks, but we did see a meeting take place a bit earlier on today between President Putin and Iran's foreign minister. And we did get a quote from President Putin essentially condemning the attacks there, the strikes on the nuclear facilities by the U.S. in Iran. Again, we'll keep you updated on all of the developments here. And if we do...
Yeah, so all these protesters, how dare you, America, to strike our nuclear capability where we have 60% enrichment and 83% enrichment and lots of it. The quantities are way beyond anything that you need for a civilian use. But you got Alex Jones and you got Stephen Bannon saying, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't go in. You should be an isolationist, be a pacifist. and just kick the can down the road until Iran has a nuclear weapon and the whole power dynamic changes. You have an escalation between the Sunnis and the Shias. You have a arms race, and believe me, Saudi Arabia has more money than God, and they can buy as much nuclear weapons as the eye can see, and it's going to end up in true Armageddon. So what do you do to prevent Armageddon, Alex Jones? You got to intervene and get the job done. Leaders take risks, and that's what America's all about. We're pioneering people, not pacifists. But Alex Jones thinks it's going to be Armageddon. Really? Then go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorants that I have, because in Armageddon, it's going to get really hot and you're going to need deodorant. So please get the citrus or the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. It has no aluminum and no baking soda. It's for males and females. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Use it as a deodorant, and it helps to detoxify your body. You're going to need that during Armageddon. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorants, because Alex Jones thinks it's going to be Armageddon. It's going to get really hot out there. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Now, if there was Armageddon, you're going to need to detoxify your body. Trust me. Zeolite is going to help to detoxify your body. Gets rid of those heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. It binds to the heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, and allows you to urinate them out in about 6 to 8 hours. You can detoxify your body every day. It's really simple. 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water. Do that every day. Very simple. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Another thing that's very important to detoxify your life is make sure you drink filtered water. Make sure that you stay away from processed foods. Make sure you don't buy anything from Alex Jones. And oh, by the way, you should look around your house, basement, the cupboards, the closets, the garage. Get rid of those cleaning agents and painting supplies that you don't need, because when you breathe that in, it disrupts your endocrine system and your immune system. Now, if you absolutely have to have them, put them in layered containers that you can get at like the Container Store or something like that, and put them in the container and have them double or triple layered. By doing that, you're reducing your exposure. Super important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Take it every day, right? Because Alex Jones thinks there's going to be Armageddon. Meanwhile, the oil market is trading at $73.58. If it was Armageddon, I'm pretty sure that oil would be trading at $300 a barrel.
Going on right now with the Middle East Institute about all of this conflict, and I do want to take you there. Now, it is happening live, but it looks like it's about to end, so I do want to back it up just a little bit so you can listen into some of those remarks here on Live Now from Fox.
General, let me start with you. What caught your eye over the weekend? What are you thinking about these days?
Thanks, Ken, and good to be back here with you, and good to be with Colby and Dan as well. So really, I think 3 things that I would just kind of highlight here for you. First and foremost, as a former military guy, I need to talk about the military execution here, and I do think this was extraordinary execution by the forces under the command of the U.S. Central Command commander. I think there was very skillful use of deception here and OPSEC, frankly. That's uncharacteristic for us. Frankly, but we did. I think our
just remember, when you're a podcaster and you have a show like Stephen Bannon or Alex Jones, it's easier to sell ad revenue, get eyeballs, sell products to people that are fearful and that want to be a pacifist and hide. Leaders have to convince people that take the risk, move forward, don't be fearful. That's a leader. Do you see that in Alex Jones? Do you see that in Stephen Bannon when it comes to the Iran issue? No. They don't show leadership skills. And America is about taking risks, calculated, but taking risks and not being fearful. That is Americana. So if you want to be part of the Pax Americana, you can't align yourself with Steve Bannon and Alex Jones because they're pussies.
You have to appreciate that this was carried out with a high degree of skill by our military professionals here, and for that we should be grateful and very, very proud. I think the second thing that really stands out to me is I'm struck by the uncertainty that remains in the wake of this now as we head into almost 48 hours after execution of our strike. We obviously are still very, very.
Let me get this understand this right. Let me understand this right. Alex Jones is telling you to be a pacifist. His father didn't serve in the military. His grandfather served in the military. I believe his uncles that were of age during World War II served in the military. Thank you for your service. But the thing is, his father and he did not serve in the military. All right? When you don't have a family lineage that has served in the military from one generation to another, to another, to another, to another, you have to question what's going on. Now, with Stephen Bannon, he served in the military. His daughter went to West Point. Thank you for your service. But the thing is, it's really important that certain times you got to be on the fucking battlefield and get the job done instead of being a pussy. So, in terms of Alex Jones, is he really the tip of the spear? Is he really the tip of the spear?
I think the second thing here on uncertainty is how is Iran going to respond? There's been some strikes into Israel, but not much more. Certainly nothing directed at us. Do they have a surprise for us? Have they held something in reserve that we're going to see revealed here? They certainly have capabilities, but they have been degraded significantly. That may impact the delivery of this, but nonetheless, I think that's something else. I think that's injecting some certainty. And then, of course, how are we going to respond to that? If it's kind of a tepid response, will we be going back in? Or if it's more effective, then
it's really simple. It's really simple. Just imagine if I was president of the United States. All right. Let's say DrPaulCottrell is the president of the United States. Mr. President, what would you do if the Strait of Hormuz was blocked? I'd get on the TV in the Oval Office and I would say, the end of the Iranian regime has come. The decapitation of the Ayatollah is going to happen. Period. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
The solution can insert some certainty into a situation, but I think what we're seeing here is that there still is a significant amount of uncertainty about what is going to take place here, even with a very well executed operation. I think the third thing, and I'll just very briefly comment on this, is that I think one of the things I'm trying to pay attention to, and hopefully we'll begin to see more and more indications of it, but how does the region respond to this? There have been some very significant changes just in the last 8 or 9 days with kind of the further reduction of the Iranian military, the threat that they once posed to the region. How do regional actors respond to this?
A lot of words. It's really simple. The Israelis, they knocked out their command and control. They knocked out their defense systems. They're degrading their offensive systems. The transmission mechanism between giving an order from the Ayatollah to actually launching a missile or laying mines in the straits is diminished. The Israelis are hunting down the Ayatollah. But Alex Jones knows better. Really? Guy that never finished college is going to tell you the intricacies of us marching through to the Messianic era. Now, it's really simple, Alex. Negative Esau is going to die. And it was written down for 2,000 years. But he's afraid of Armageddon. Freedom is about taking risks. Don't be afraid.
A few thoughts from me. First, it seems like a moment for humility. I mean, for decades, we've been speculating about what would happen at exactly this moment if we had U.S. military strikes on Iran. But it strikes me that there's so much more that we don't know than what we do know, including the very basics of the battlefield damage assessment. It seems to me that despite some triumphalism, there's no once and for all solution here to the Iranian nuclear program, and we shouldn't expect one-off airstrikes to eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat. And you're already seeing questions about the stockpile.
No, think about it. Think about it. Just teleport yourself back to 9/11. September 11th, 2001. All right? You're teleported back there. You remember what happened and the craziness of it and the stand down and all of it. All right? Now, there were soccer moms that bought into the emotional fallacy that the Al-Qaeda was around the corner in your neighborhood. So you had news people asking soccer moms, would you be willing to give up some of your freedoms so we can get rid of Al-Qaeda? That launched into the whole Patriot Act and a ballooning out of the national security state. Because they played on the emotional fallacy that be afraid. Now, those soccer moms were fearful and said, we are not going to fear. We don't need to erode our constitutional freedoms, and that we will deal with whatever problems arise. And we will move forward and fight on the battlefield. We wouldn't have had the Patriot Act. But because there was such a large part of the population that played into the fear game, we had the Patriot Act. Now, let's go and teleport back to our time, 2025, on June 23rd. And Alex Jones is playing the fear game. Don't go into Iran because we're afraid of Armageddon. So in the first example, we had an erosion of our constitutional freedoms through the Patriot Act because soccer moms were so self-centered about their own safety that Susie and Johnny had to be protected. Now, we have an emotional fallacy from Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon saying it's going to be Armageddon, it's going to be a forever war, and blah, blah, blah. Be fearful of it. Don't engage. Well, you have another major problem, and that is a power that's going to rise with nuclear weapons that changes the whole hegemonic power in the Middle East. So one was an erosion of your constitutional freedoms because you were a pussy, and then we're going to have the changing of the hegemonic power of the United States in the Middle East because we were pussies. Thank you, Stephen Bannon, and thank you, Alex Jones, for being such pussies. I'm not really sure why it's not playing.
Big man coming through. Your big decisions are big for us too. Four Leaf Federal Credit Union. Let's money together.
There's a certain amount you can do with military and intelligence, but some of it is probably going to come down to diplomacy. Now,
All right, so what you're listening to right there is a discussion with the Middle East Institute. A lot of experts on that panel, obviously via Zoom, as it is a virtual news conference, and they're talking about a variety of topics, but as you heard, focusing on those U.S. strikes on Iran. We are just past the top of the hour here, 10:09 on the East Coast and 7:09 on the West Coast. Do want to take you out to this image that we have coming in out of the United Kingdom, as we do have Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky meeting with several UK officials. We know this is going to be a brief kind of camera spray, as it's called. They let the camera in for just a few minutes and get some initial comments, and then they exit. So let's lift up the audio here and listen in.
All right. Close that down. Let's go to Al Jazeera.
Happen if Iran was to attack the NATO training base that exists in Iraq, or if Iran was to attack US military assets in the Gulf and in the Middle East region. Of course, under the North Atlantic Treaty, which is the governing treaty of NATO, there's something called Article 5, the all for one, one for all article in that treaty that says if any NATO ally is attacked, then all would consider it as an attack on themselves. So the question mark, of course, if Iran was to strike out against a US target, would it then find itself at war with all of NATO?
All right, James, thanks very much. James Bays there at The Hague. And let's continue with this coverage of our top story, the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. Earlier, I spoke to Iran's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Education and Research, and Saeed Khatibzadeh says Israel is using the war to spread its hegemony in the region.
This is not a tit for tat ongoing conflict. This is an aggression started by the Israeli genocidal regime against Iran and Iranian people. We decided to defend under Article 51 of the UN Charter, which is our right to respond. So what is happening right now is a legitimate defense against the aggressor, which is quite clear to everybody is Israeli criminals. What is happening right now is we are trying to stop Israelis of these atrocities and all these crimes that they are doing against my people. Earlier today they attacked another Red Crescent center in Tehran. They attacked up until now few hospitals in Kermanshah in Tehran. They have martyred and killed more than hundreds of innocent children and women, and plus more to hundreds of innocent civilians. They are deliberately attacking our civilians, and they are just misusing all these words of the nuclear program and others to just justify their unjust, unprovoked, unnecessary aggression against Iran. They are doing this because they would like to impose hegemony on all countries in this region and to pose threat to everybody. Everybody can understand in this region that what's going on is Israelis trying to misuse the opportunity in the region to institutionalize its hegemony over other countries, and we have no option just to
wait a minute. Iran was providing missiles, providing funding to the proxy groups like the Houthis, like Hezbollah, like Hamas. They were the hub of terror. Hello. Israel's doing a favor for the whole world by knocking out Iran, because America, since Carter, couldn't get the job done. Reagan couldn't get the job done. Bush Sr. couldn't get the job done. Clinton couldn't get the job done. Bush Jr. couldn't get the job done. Barack Obama couldn't get the job done, and he wrote a $150 billion check to give them more time to make nuclear weapons. Trump, 45, couldn't get the job done because he was afraid. Biden, he didn't even have a brain. And he couldn't get the job done because you had a bunch of lower level people running the show at the White House. And guess what? Trump has another chance to redeem himself and kill Esau.
And on Iran soil, I'm sure that this is something that Iran will decide on how, when, and at which level to respond to Americans and this aggression that they did against Iran.
Let's speak now to Abbas Aslani, who's a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins us now from Tehran. Abbas, welcome again. We've been hearing from our correspondent that there is a suggestion perhaps that Iran may make some kind of statement about what its response might be at some point this evening. Overall, how do you assess Iran's options about its response?
Part of the response which has been going, some additional segments might be added to that, which is in the military section. But in addition to that military front, Iran is also considering some other measures in relation to the political sphere, specifically when it comes to its nuclear program. And I think this second point here is important. We might be hearing on the issues related to that. Iran is considering, scaling down its cooperation with the IAEA, and because Iran believes that the past cooperation has backfired and there has not been seeing good faith from the other side. In the past couple of days following the attack on the nuclear facility, as of yesterday morning, there has been discussions about Iran considering a withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. If that's not the case, at least Iran will, make some measures in, limiting the access of the IAEA to the nuclear facilities in the country, because many think that IAEA is leaking information from Iran's nuclear sites to the American as well as other Western parties.
Okay, Iran won't want to do anything that escalates the situation to a potentially catastrophic effect in Iran itself. But how would it calibrate its response to ensure that it has an impact but doesn't have the worst effect?
Nick, so far Iran has not been coming with a full force. It has kept the potential for a very likely scenario whereby the war expands into a much bigger, geographical span, and in terms of, intensity, it will be much more severe. So
it would only expand in geographical intensity if it was launched by Iran. And this is the problem with a theocratic regime like we have with the Ayatollah. So there's going to be proxy groups. There may be even cells in the United States that are dormant that may attack. But don't be fearful. America should not be fearful. America never should be fearful. You move forward. You don't run. But Steve Bannon and Alex Jones run. They run away. They don't run to the problem. They run away from the problem. So you have pacifist policies going all the way back to Carter, the peanut farmer, and fast forward to where we're at right now. And they have breakout capability. Thank you very much for being a pacifist. That is what, if you boil it all down, you get to the essence of what Alex Jones and what Stephen Bannon is saying. That is the essence of what they're fucking saying. But there are so many people within the MAGA movement that's like almost 50-50 that's buying into the bullshit.
In order to condemn the military aggression against its nuclear facilities, at the bilateral or other multilateral platforms, Iran has been seeking that.
We've lost our connection there with Abbas. Apologies for that, but I think we got a good gist of what he was saying. Yes. All right, Russia's president is calling the US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites grunts. Vladimir Putin made the comments after meeting Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi in Moscow. Putin says Russia's position has been conveyed.
This is Putin, and the United States should not bomb Formos because the nuclear facilities. This is Putin. It was totally unnecessary.
Meanwhile, he's launching missiles at Kiev. America First policy, right? America First policy should be, you see an enemy, you kill it. Not, you see your enemy and hide under your bed. Hide underneath your, underneath the table. Be fearful. That's what Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon is all about. America First? Really? America First? How is it America First when you kick the can down the road and you let Iran end up having a nuclear weapon? We know how this all plays out because that's exactly what happened in North Korea. We know how this all plays out. That's exactly what happened in India and Pakistan. America First is going to end up America last if we don't fix and correct. Now, I am a major supporter of Trump. I've voted for him 3 times. But he will be a failed president if he doesn't knock out the Ayatollah. Like I said, this is knocking out the nuclear program and decapitating the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah must be removed from this earth. But America first. Yeah, America first. So you can buy a 64-ounce Big Gulp at 7-Eleven cheaper. America first. No, America first. You know what America first was? On July 2nd of 1863, I think it was, Little Round Top, Gettysburg. That was America first. Holding the line to making sure that the Confederacy didn't win that battle and march to Washington, D.C. That was America first. Taking risks and holding the line, not running away like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones.
That support may include a request for more military equipment for Iran. Russia and Iran cooperate in the military sphere, exchanging technology and selling weapons. But Vladimir Putin previously said that Russia would not get involved in this conflict militarily due to its own military operation in Ukraine. The Iranian foreign minister could also ask Putin to be a mediator in negotiations with Donald Trump and discuss with the Russian partners how far Iran could really go in its response to Israeli and US attacks and assess possible consequences.
The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog has been leading an emergency meeting after Sunday's US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Members of the International Atomic Energy Agency are in Vienna to assess the escalation and the risks.
Right.
Both
To prove my
Iran and the
point,
IAEA.
to prove my point about oil and that we're not going into Armageddon like Alex Jones thinks. All right, to prove my point, oil is now trading at 72.91. I said that that the support level is going to be tested today. 72.95 is the support level. It's being tested right now. And if it breaks, then the next support level is going to be 65. Major support level. There's intermediate support levels that are less important. Where's Armageddon, Alex? Where? Where is it? Once again, is he really the tip of the spear? Or what is it, or what's happening, and I think people really need to pay attention to what I'm saying. What is happening with these podcasters, what's happening with this alternative media, like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones, they have huge followings. I wish I had a large following like that. I'd be able to say to more people. But the thing is that they have such huge followings, it ends up becoming gonzo journalism. It's all about them. Bannon is butthurt that he's not part of the inner circle of Trump. And so he produces himself as some sort of, messiah of MAGA, and and that he's just, moving it beyond Trump. It's gonzo journalism. That's all it is. That's all it is. Alex Jones, gonzo journalism. How whatever's happening has to somehow tangentially intersect Alex Jones. Gonzo journalism. And there's so many people that bought into it. So many people. He sells you supplements that don't, does it look like he's taking them? Alex Jones is younger than DrPaulCottrell. Now, look at Alex Jones and look at DrPaulCottrell. Who do you think's health protocol works? Really? And he couldn't even tell you how to navigate through the crisis of 2020 and how to navigate through the aftershock. And by the way, in 5 years, you're going to know a lot of people that have brain problems. Better pay attention to what I have to say. Think Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon can do that?
There's amazing things we've accomplished.
I don't think so.
I think if they decide to stop, to say we've done enough, but they're still talking about all the things they want to do and the need to end this threat from Iran. So it's a little unclear where we're going.
Is there any indication of what an Iranian response may be, or is it sort of just preparing for all worst case scenarios at this point?
It's pretty much preparing for anything that could happen. We all, the Iranians have said, they've used some fairly harsh rhetoric about how the Americans are going to regret this and everyone's going to pay for these terrible things that have been done to Iran.
Don't be fearful. You go into the fire. You don't run away from it. During 9/11, I'll tell you, some of the most heroic things that happened at 9/11 was those firefighters going into the fire. All right? That is America first. See a problem, you go in, no matter what the risks are, you fix it. That's America first. Not running away. Not running away like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones. Now, if you listen to DrPaulCottrell, if some of these events happen where the strait is clogged up or there's some attack on the oil refineries or the oil fields in Saudi Arabia or whatever, or even an attack on our strait group, first, Iran's going to be done. But not just that, oil will spike. Take it as an opportunity to short it, and you'll make a lot of money. But Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones won't tell you that. Don't be fearful. Go in. Move forward. That is America first. But what I'm seeing, and I watch a lot of this bullshit, what I am seeing is there's a lot of people that are afraid. And so over time, we have college students that are getting out of college and they don't have muscle mass. They're not into sports. They're all about maybe their academics. But you need to have students need to have this coupling of intellect and physicality. And when you have that, you just have a more, more functioning society instead of kind of like, just a little, pacifist. And what's amazing is this Alex Jones used to bodybuild. He used to be fit, but he ended up being a slob. It's just so what the point I'm making is that there's the testosterone levels are going down in the society, the endocrine disruptors are causing problems. And so what happens is that when you have males in the society where their endocrine is disrupted, their endocrine system is disrupted, and their testosterone levels go down, then they're just passive. Just very passive. Where are the wolves? Where are the wolves? Everyone's a sheep. Where are the wolves? Who's protecting the pack? Decades ago, we had lots of wolves protecting packs. We don't have that anymore. We have preppers that I'm going to hoard and I'm going to hide. What's the problem? Well, we got a tyranny of government. Well, if you have tyranny of government, then you don't hide. Well, I'm going to prep. I'm going to save up on corn and beans and rice. Really? Really?
Is really significant. Unfortunately, what the Trump administration is doing through a variety of policies enacted, the most significant of which is the budget bill, the reconciliation bill that's currently going back and forth between the Senate and the House, is it really removes the majority of the incentives that have been in place since 2005 to bring cleaner electrons onto the grid. And so, unfortunately, I think what that means for the whole economy is going to be higher energy prices, less resilience, less manufacturing, fewer jobs, big multiplier effects. Mm-hmm. For us here at the Green Bank, we continue to see a lot of projects that are really interesting and benefit both, the low-income communities that we're trying to serve and the broader economy. But it's definitely going to be more challenging. And there are estimates that 50% of the backlog that's in the interconnection queue right now on the grid could be at risk if the bill passes in its current form.
And that's not even taking into account how long that line is to actually get connected to a grid. So if I was looking at individual stocks, is this like a fossil fuel play then at the end of the day, or are there more nuanced ways to play this?
I sort of think of the way the U.S. has been in the last couple of months in the way that I'm used to looking at emerging markets. I invested in emerging markets for almost 10 years. And frankly, I think you've got to skate where the puck is going when it comes to policy. It's really hard to stick your neck out there. That being said, I do think there is maybe some potential in the utility scale solar and wind market. And the reason for that is, at the same time that we're doing all these things to hurt this cheap, easy to get on the grid energy, we're having this big national discussion about how we become AI leaders. And we heard NextEra CEO John Ketchum say last week, if we kill solar and wind, we're going to lose the AI race. And so I do think that there's the potential for lawmakers to come back to the table to try to support some utility scale solar plus storage in particular. The administration is still very focused on domestic manufacturers, so I think a name like First Solar might benefit. You've got the gas turbine manufacturers, GEV and Siemens, but this is a cyclical industry. They've got backlogs to 2032 now, and I just see more downside than upside at this point with the backlogs the way that they are. Then you've got clean firm power, which is nuclear, geothermal, and that's all well and good, and I think that does need to be built out. But there aren't that many ways to play it in the market. You can look at the Sprott Uranium Trust. There's a geothermal pure play Ormat. There's Constellation Energy Group. But it's it's tough out there. I think the reality is that you're going to start to see some people have to come back to the table because solar and storage is the cheapest and fastest way to get new energy onto the grid.
Emily, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Emily Lavelle, Chief Investment Officer for the New Mexico Climate Investment Center. I didn't know that New Mexico was number 2 in terms of, was it oil?
It's because the Permian, like the rock that's part of the Permian, spans Texas and New Mexico. So it's this huge rock. Okay. And that's where it gets a lot of it from. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I don't know. I'm still in the camp of we're going to kind of need everything. Yeah. It seems like I can't imagine. At one point, we were thinking about a transition to almost purely to alternative energy, but that seems unrealistic. I don't know, but it just seems like but what's changed over the last few years has been these high-tech AI fuel data centers that, well, if you put that in the demand equation, then it seems like you need maybe everything.
That's what's so confusing to me, though, about the tech AI trade plus power is that signing agreements to make that happen is still really weird and like very, very difficult because tech doesn't want to sign like a 10-year purchase power agreement, right? Like that's not how they're structured. But that's what the utilities, that's what the power guys, that's what the energy guys need in order to put the money in to build something. So we've seen deals that expand plants or prevent them from shutting them down, but not building new ones necessarily. And that's going to be a real head scratcher for me. And then you put over the market volatility and uncertainty, and that's where the Iran situation comes into play. It's hard to make decisions with that kind of volatility.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming up, Sally Yamaz, Bloomberg Intelligence senior oil analyst. We're getting her thoughts on what's happening with oil. It's now trading down by about 1%. This is good.
All right, let me see what's going on with, all right, this is General Keane here on Fox Business.
Get Saspaya.
Saspaya!
Oh, wow. The quickest way from 1 billion points of data to a point of view. Saspaya.
Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and the chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. And General, you have been front and center in all of this as we watch the developments. What are you expecting over the near term?
Well, I think right in front of us, after this successful strike, does this war end at the negotiating table, or does it end on the battlefield? And a couple of things from the Iranians' perspective. They have their own time schedule now, Maria, in terms of what are they going to do. And I'll discuss some options that I think they have. And also, I think a major factor in their options will be what remains of their nuclear enterprise and their ballistic missile infrastructure. Those are the two key targets that Israel's been after, and obviously the nuclear enterprise. We supported that rather significantly. So I think when you look at this, the Iranians got 4 options. One, you've already mentioned it, and that is to come to the negotiating table based on President Trump's offer. And certainly that would mean dismantling completely whatever remains of the nuclear enterprise, the ballistic missile program. That would mean 100% verification by independent inspectors. And I think other things that would be put on the table by the administration is once and for all, stop all support to your proxies and change your malign and aggressive behavior in the region. In other words, the fact that you're trying to dominate and control the region and destabilize it, that's over. And we're not going to cut a deal with you until that kind of fundamental change takes place. Then we would consider ceasefire, and then we would consider sanctions relief. The second thing that's available to them is just continue what they're doing, Maria. In other words, continue to attack Israel and continue to defend against that as best as they can. I think these first 2 options are probably, they're welcome options, the first one for sure, but both of them I think are likely unlikely. The third option is a limited symbolic response against the United States, similar to what we did post-Qasem Soleimani. The Iranians fired ballistic missiles at our bases in Iraq, at 2 bases. The Iraqi Shia militia are right there on the border with Iran. It's easy to transfer rockets and missiles to them, and also drones that they could use to attack our bases. That's the easiest basis for them to attack. And they could do a symbolic attack in their minds, to curb and restrain some of the humiliation that the regime is feeling as a result of what has taken place for the last week plus. That is certainly a possibility. The Strait of Hormuz could be part of that limited response. They could try to shut down the Persian Gulf. They've never been able to do it in the past. They won't be able to do it now. If they did, it would be only very temporary. Look at the United States air power and maritime sources are right there. They begin to do it, we're going to interfere and stop them rather quickly. And then the other option is an unrestrained, consequential attack on the United States bases in the region, with the intent is to kill Americans and really seek retribution. And that would be a result of the humiliation that they feel and the passion that they feel to really do something about it, and the urging from the hardliners around the regime saying you've got to respond to this in a strong way. They also could bring in some of the Arab states and hit oil fields, etc., as they promised to do.
Yeah.
Certainly, any attack on the United States, whether it's symbolic and limited or an unrestrained consequential attack, if Americans are hurt in this process, believe me, this regime has been told that the United States is coming with everything that they have. And there will be, everything will be on the table. That'll be the economic and energy targets, oil fields, gas, power plants, and literally, I think also the civilian leadership would be on the target, in addition to all the targets that the Israelis have been hitting and need to be cleaned up themselves.
Well, it seems to me that, you know, after this successful strike, it's a message to Iran: we can come at you anytime, anywhere. And at this point, it's President Trump's terms, right? I mean, you know, this negotiation is over. I mean, President Trump is now setting the terms. He's got the cards, and yet they're still trying to message out that they have leverage with the Strait of Hormuz. You know, I mean, and when I spoke with the Secretary of State yesterday, Marco Rubio, he went right to China as an encouragement to say, look, make sure they don't shut this down. Watch this. Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I would encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that, but other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force, and that was the point of this mission, and that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate, we're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous, we have responses available that are devastating.
But General, he also said that, you know, he's tired of the Iranians constantly wanting indirect talks, right? He said, we want direct talks. That's another thing that the Iranians have done. They always say we're not going to talk specifically or directly to the United States. Marco Rubio yesterday said that's over.
Yeah.
Your reaction to that?
Well, I think high time for that. I don't think we should have done indirect talks in the past anyway. But we all knew these talks weren't going anywhere, because there was no. What our viewers have to understand is what the Iranians have done in creating a nuclear enterprise. There's nothing like it in the world. They built it at 12 plus sites, so it would have resiliency and redundancy, so it could survive an attack. They saw an attack in the future, and they built this enterprise to include its underground facilities, absorb the attack, survive it, recover from it, and rebuild. That is why they would not voluntarily dismantle it right from the outset. They were willing to experience what they just experienced. Now, it's much more devastating, I think. They were counting on maybe it's Israel only and not the United States.
Right.
But the president stepped up for all the reasons we have said time and time again. He gave them the warning, and he told them he would follow through. And I think they had some doubt about whether he would execute that or not. They were betting on the fact that we would not do it. But obviously, he promised he would do it, and he fulfilled that promise. He deserves a lot of credit for bold leadership in executing this plan.
Yeah, he sure did. General, I got to ask you about what we're hearing out of Russia now, because the former president there, President Medvedev, is now warning that, quote, multiple countries are still poised to provide Iran with nuclear warheads, General. Can you imagine in the middle of this, this is what Medvedev comes out and says?
Yeah. You know, these guys, their narrative goes on and on and on.
They cannot. They are so afraid that Iran gets into the orbit of the United States. They are super afraid of this. I'm telling you, people are not paying attention to what I've been saying for a while.
System. If you give them long-range missiles, we're going to use nukes. And
people are not paying attention to what I'm saying about this. Satan is attached to negative Esau. if you kill the Ayatollah, you are allowing for peace and prosperity to ensue in the world. Now, if you listen to Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon being America First pacifists, what you're basically doing is prolonging peace and prosperity in the world with the fear of, well, it's going to be Armageddon. I don't think so. We are successful as a nation because we're blessed, not because of our, greatness, innately. We are blessed. If the blessing goes away, we are no longer a great nation. And part of that blessing is to take risks. Part of that blessing is don't be fearful. Do things that are right. Don't get into forever wars under, false pretenses. But that's not what this is. For example, the government knew there wasn't weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but they said there were. Saddam Hussein wasn't even involved in 9/11. We went into Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses for, to control the region. All right, that was wrong, and we paid the price. Trillions of dollars, lots of lives lost, 20 years of nothing, getting nothing out of it. This is different. This is different. Now, how is it different? Well, one, they're at near breakaway nuclear capability. Two, they are the hub of terrorism around the world. Three, if they do get a nuclear weapon, either through North Korea or Russia, or they make it themselves. MBS said that he was going to buy a lot of nukes. Do you really think that a nuclear war between Shia and Sunni is going to be beneficial for the world? So it is important to decapitate the regime. It's not just the nuclear capability. Because if you decapitate the regime and you have democracy flourish in Iran, you stabilize the economy, and they're under the umbrella of the United States, then one, you're circumventing China getting oil, and two, that secular, peaceful democracy isn't going to be buying nukes from North Korea and Russia. But America First pacifism from Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones would lead to the Ayatollah. Let's say we knocked out the nuclear capability, which I think we did. The Ayatollah could say, Russia, we're going to purchase some nukes. North Korea, we're going to purchase some nukes. Well, that pacifism that Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon had been projecting, even Tucker Carlson, now Iran has nukes. Thank you very much. They were going to get nukes in either way, unless you kill the regime. The regime is part of the package. You have to kill the Ayatollah. All right. Let's go back to Bloomberg.
We focus too much on the front end of the curve, but especially when we talk about companies, the back end of that curve is a lot more important because that's where a lot of the investment decisions are being made. So to your point, I think so. I think generally when you do see the whole curve move up, that generally.
Let's go back to Fox News. They just released 18 minutes ago, Israel unleashed barrage of missiles on Iran on the heels of U.S. strikes.
You wouldn't cut your lawn with scissors. It's not the right tool for the journal. So why are you still using the wrong deodorant? That's why we made
Mike Tobin joins us. Hi, Mike. Good morning.
Good morning, Dana. Israel's defense minister says this is an unprecedented show of force with Israeli warplanes in the air, at least 50 of them unloading at least 100 missiles on Iranian targets. Among those targets, as you mentioned, the Fordo nuclear facility, Israeli warplanes have been hitting the access road, preventing the Iranians from going back there. They hit a general intelligence headquarters, radar sites, missile production facilities, the command center for Revolutionary Guard, and they hit a command center for the Sayed Shuhada Corps. These are the people who were responsible for putting down down revolutions. They hit something called the destruction of Israel clock. That counts backwards to the destruction of Israel, and they hit Iran's very old fleet of aircraft. Meantime, the Director General of the IAEA, speaking to the UN Security Council, says the path to preventing Iran from getting a bomb is still negotiation.
We have a window of opportunity to return to dialogue and diplomacy. If that
Kill the
window
Ayatollah.
closes, violence and destruction could reach unthinkable levels, and the global non-proliferation regime, as we know it, could crumble and fall.
As Iran vows retaliation, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin said there was no justification for the U.S. bombing of Iran. Big time in the nation of Qatar, the U.S. Embassy there has issued a shelter-in-place order for American citizens, saying it was out of an abundance of caution. Bill and Dana?
All right, thank you. Mike Tobin. Interesting.
So take a look at this. The B-2 stealth bombers that carried out those strikes were returning back home to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri yesterday. Great footage here. 7 of the aircraft flew east from the base directly to Iran, over 7,000 miles to bomb those 3 nuke sites. That is a 37-hour round trip and a big welcome home to those airmen and women.
So check this out. This gives you a graphic vision of it. So 6 of those B-2s flew over Fordow, dropping a total of 12 bunker buster bombs on the Iranian nuclear facility. The critical site is very deep inside a mountain. Beside those all-important centrifuges that are concealed hundreds of feet underground, the targets included other infrastructure, namely a checkpoint, an entrance tunnel, a support building, and a security perimeter.
And our Jennifer Griffin has been working her sources all weekend long.
But like what Secretary Rubio has been saying, if it's for peaceful purposes, why are you putting it underneath a mountain? And why do you have so much of it? No civilian purpose for the quantity of enrichment is needed. I mean, the Iranian stockpiling of enrichment of uranium is way beyond any civilian use. Not a little bit, by a lot. There is zero chance that they're doing just civilian. Zero chance that they're doing this for just civilian purposes. They're doing this to build a bomb. But America first, pacifism, don't do anything until after the fact. Well, wait a minute here. That sounds kind of like Lehman. DrPaulCottrell, what do you mean? How could it be like Lehman? That was a financial crisis. The Federal Reserve wasn't watching the systemic risk that was building up at the banks through their regulators. Well, if you don't pay attention to what Iran's doing and you give them incentive to continue on their program, guess what? You have a meltdown. We had a financial meltdown because we weren't paying attention to the systemic risk. Well, there's systemic risk building up in Iran. To handle systemic risk, you have to eliminate it. Now, to eliminate risk, you can't be fearful. So America first, pacifism, by definition, is going to lead to a nuclear weapon in Iran. Thank you, Alex Jones. Thank you, Stephen Bannon. Thank you for fucking things up. What we need to do is circle the wagons, and America needs to prevail in this because Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, either purchasing it or making it. Now, if you eliminate the Ayatollah, why would you, who would be wanting to buy it? Because you got to remember, what's the Ayatollah believe in? You got to set the world on fire to usher in the 12th Imam. Well, wait a minute. How are you going to set the world on fire? Oh, nuclear weapons. So America First pacifism is somewhat aligned to the 12th Imam. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Stephen Bannon, for aligning with the Ayatollah. I'm sure that your naval service really, you know, is proud of your activities now.
Well, to keep the operational security side of the house intact. But they actually were able to put all this together. They were able to suppress enemy air defense, known as SEED. They were able to push all of those out front in support of the B-2 in order to drop those bombs along on Natanz and Fordow, and then Fordow, and then also the Tomahawk strike from coming in for Isfahan. Why that's important, you know, when you look at the defense primes, I think it was a big win for a lot of defense primes in this, especially when you look at Boeing, right? Boeing for the F-18 and the EA-18 Growler, which is an electronic warfare capability, right? You want to be able to go in there and jam ahead of time. They really proved their worth on this. Lockheed's F-35 as well as the F-22. You put these pieces together into this integrated operation, it's pretty amazing. Then on top of that, if you add in Northrop's B-2 and what it did for their stealth program, I think is very, very key and shows a lot of promise against Russian air defenses like Iran has the S-300, which is one of their
This
air
guy's
defense
making a
capabilities.
this guy is making a great point. This guy's making a great point. And this is part of the reason why North Korea and you hear in Russia that they're going to give nuclear weapons to Iran. Because they know that the United States' Space Force technology and the integration of it will knock out their defense system. Russia is naked. North Korea is naked. But America First, Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones wants to make sure that you can buy a big gulp at 7-Eleven and just focus on that at a low cost. Keep your taxes down. Stay at home. Don't worry about international affairs. Just let the Ayatollah get a nuclear weapon. America first. Yeah.
They definitely have a reticence right now to purchasing anything that's U.S. made. They say they want to be able to do this, but they have to be able to integrate those defense plans. So when you look at air defense capabilities, the SAMT and others that are European, they could go to those. But from a manufacturing perspective, can they scale to meet the demands of what Europe's really looking for? And so I think there are going to be companies that are looking to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at scalability for some of these capabilities, as well as looking for that top-of-the-line solution, you're still going to look to the Patriot air defense systems. You're going to look for THAAD, the Terminal High-Altitude Air Defense systems, right, from Lockheed and Raytheon. You're really gonna still see a lot of support for those types of capabilities.
Hey, Wayne, when I look at some of I'm telling you, the United States, and we haven't even fully integrated AI and drones in this. We are literally less than 10 years away of Star Wars. I mean, I'm not saying Star Wars in the sense of Reagan. I'm talking about Star Wars in the sense of George Lucas. The only thing we're going to be missing is lightsabers. All right. Let me plug some products so you can help support the work that I do, because where else are you going to be entertained? And where else are you going to be told that Stephen Bannon is fucking up America? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 14. This is 14 parts per million. You need to get the Max 35, that's 35 parts per million, or Cleanse, which is 30 parts per million. You take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What that's going to do is going to help the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx. It will help with the mucosal barrier and the epithelial lining. Super important to boost up your immune system. It's part of my protocol to boost up the immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's something that I've been taking for 5 years, more than 5 years, every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two and go back to your maintenance dose once you start to feel better. Also, get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This has no fluoride. It whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, helps the health of the gum line, reduces inflammation. Super important to use every day. Please go to my store, get the best toothpaste that you can get. Yes, it is a little bit more expensive, but it is the best toothpaste that you can buy. You can't buy anything better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the toothpaste. Again, use discount 5, get $5 off any order. If you spend $150 or more on any order, you get a free gift until supplies last. Trust me, you'll like the gift.
Doing some fantastic reporting. She's live at the Pentagon this morning. Jen, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill. No one here at the Pentagon thinks this is one and done. From a technical standpoint, the military part of this operation on Saturday went flawlessly. 7 B-2 bombers, as you mentioned, took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and traveled east, while another 2 traveled west over the Pacific, serving as a decoy. The B-2s can be seen on takeoff and landing, but were so stealth, the Iranian air defenses never saw them. 125 U.S. warplanes were involved in the strike, including F-22 and F-35 escorts. 75 precision-guided weapons fired by the U.S. at Iran's 3 nuclear sites.
Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise.
At a briefing Sunday morning here at the Pentagon, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, explained how the B-2s took off from Missouri at 12:01 a.m. Saturday morning. 18 hours later, 12 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs dropped by 6 B-2 bombers on the main enrichment site in Fordo. A 7th B-2 bomber dropped 2 30,000-pound bombs on the underground uranium enrichment site at Natanz. Lastly, 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away landed at Isfahan.
Initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
But it is much too early to say what the bomb damage assessment at that site, at those sites, with their hardened tunnels some 600 feet deep at Isfahan really were. Current and former Pentagon officials think the program was likely set back by 1 to 2 years, but no one knows where the highly enriched uranium actually is. 900 pounds of it, enough for 9 nuclear bombs. It could have been moved or could be buried. That's why you see those Israeli jets bombing the 2 entrances to the underground facility at Fordo today to ensure nothing goes in or out. There is little doubt that the U.S. will now face a retaliatory strike from Iran after the U.S. military killed General Qasem Soleimani in 2020, Bill. It took Iran 10 days to fire ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq.
Yeah, Jen, and to that point about what may come next, if anything, Iranian state media is saying basically any U.S. military base in the region now is a potential target. And you just mentioned they hit back in 2020 after that Soleimani strike at Al-Assad Air Base. What are you hearing from your military contacts? Because we've got, I think, 40,000 troops deployed in the Middle East, sprinkled amongst different bases. What are they doing to prepare for any possible retaliation or attack?
Well, Bill, certainly the bases where the outposts where U.S. military troops are based in Iraq and Syria are the most vulnerable. But right now, I would say military planners are focusing most on the Strait of Hormuz. They believe that Iran will try to mine the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Navy will then be involved in demining and how to prevent that disruption to oil supplies. You have U.S. Navy vessels all across the Middle East, 5 Navy destroyers in the Eastern Med protecting Israel. Then you have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, those submarines that you don't see underwater. A lot of Navy power out there. And then those B-2 bombers, some reports that they may have gone further onto Guam and could be in position for a second wave of strikes. Bill?
Jennifer, here at home, there's a debate about the budget and the defense budget in particular. How do you think this action plays into that? Because they're trying to get a bill, signed to the president's desk by the 4th of July.
Well, I think right now, when the U.S. is involved in what arguably could be the start of a war in the Middle East, you're not going to have trouble getting a defense budget passed through Congress. So I think that will be the least of their problems. There are going to be some important confirmation hearings on the Hill in the next few days for the new CENTCOM commander, as well as the new Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. We'll be listening to those hearings, but I don't think that Congress will hold back in terms of money for the Pentagon at this moment with the U.S. forces out in harm's way.
Jennifer Griffin, thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Don't miss out on growth opportunities for your business due to lack of available cash flow. Capitus has helped over 55,000 small.
Thanks, Jen.
And joining us now is Captain Todd Sawhill. He's a former naval intelligence officer, and he served as a targeting expert at the CENTCOM commanders in the Middle East area. And it's so good to have you here. I just want to read one thing from President Trump overnight. He wrote this on Truth Social. Monumental damage was done to all nuclear sites in Iran, as shown by satellite images. Obliteration is an accurate term. The white structure shown is deeply embedded into the rock, with even its roof well below ground level and completely shielded from flame. The biggest damage took place far below ground level. Bullseye, triple exclamation point, and Israel and the United States are continuing to do those assessments. You did some planning between 2010 and 2023. How does the operation look compared to the planning that you were a part of?
First of all, good morning. And I tell you right now, from what I've seen, the planning and the execution looks extremely similar to the way that we drew it up and the way it was actually practiced on multiple occasions. So the execution looks exactly according to the way that we wanted it to go based on target selection and weapons deployment.
And Captain, I understand you have a lot of experience, particularly with targeting and intel on the Isfahan facility. That's where the IAEA says they've got all sorts of enriched uranium hidden under the tunnels there. I believe that's the only location where we didn't use bunker busters. We instead used, I think, 30 Tomahawk missiles to hit. In your experience with what you learned over the last 15 years or so, would those Tomahawks be able to get in there, into those tunnels, and do the kind of damage we're hoping for?
Now think about it. Stephen Bannon was in the Navy. Now, the Navy was a major integral piece to this attack. Don't you think a former Navy man would have been a little bit more supportive of our troops instead of saying that, oh, this is going to lead to Armageddon, this is a bad thing to do, and we shouldn't be doing this? Really? Really? I'm pretty sure that in my family's lineage, we've served in every service except I don't think we had any Marines, but we had Air Force, we had Army, and a lot of Navy. Army and a lot of Army and a lot of Navy, but some Air Force, and obviously at the time there wasn't a Space Force. But I don't think we had any Marines. But in the family lineage for serving the country. But I'll tell you, you gotta feel supportive of that Navy and that Air Force, but especially the Navy, because they're going to be the tip of the spear when this gets hot and heavy. But Stephen Bannon, ex-Navy guy, wants you to stay at home and drink Big Gulp at 7-Eleven, and don't be engaged, don't be on battlefield, don't be supporter of the troops, knocking out the Ayatollah because he's afraid. He's afraid. Once again, Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones, all they do is gonzo journalism. It's all about them. It's all about them. Stephen Bannon, in the case of Stephen Bannon, he thinks he's the core of MAGA. He's butthurt that he's not part of the inner circle of the White House. And Alex Jones, he's always been gonzo journalism to be able to, to sell stuff, to prep. Now, if you're going to sell prepping material, you got to scare your audience to make sure that they buy that prepping material, right? So his whole shtick is fear and how it tangentially relates to him. You notice how he weaves the story and how he's part of it? It's gonzo journalism. Gonzo journalism. Then he's telling you, get his supplements, right? He's saying to go and get his supplements. Now, look at him. And look at me. I tell you what I take. on a daily basis, and I try to bring it down to an affordable level to the best that I can. If I had a larger channel and it was monetized like Stephen Bannon or whatever, and I had ad revenue, I would drop the prices on the supplements to get more people involved so it helps their health. I can't do that because of the fucking censorship on YouTube. Yet I have the solution, and the proof's in the pudding. People that have been watching me for 5 years or 10 years, have I aged? And I'm not a vampire, all right? Look at Alex Jones, who's younger than I am. He looks like a fat ass that has aged 20 years in the last 10. Because it's all about gonzo journalism. It's not about your health. It's not about your wellness. It's not about you navigating and benefiting from the tumultuous times. Like, for example, oil is trading at $72.97, all right? And I told you that throughout the day, we're going to be testing that support level of $72.95. And if it breaks, the next major support level is 65. Well, if you short the market, if you short oil, you're going to make a lot of money. Bet Alex Jones isn't telling you that. So why do you support the fucker? Why? It's gonzo journalism. Why? He doesn't even use the crap that he sells. Now with Stephen Bannon, it's gonzo journalism because he thinks he's the tip of the spear of the MAGA movement. And because of his large audience, he's creating a fracture that potentially could cause harm for the midterm elections. Because he's butthurt, because he's not in the inner circle of the White House. Gonzo journalism.
No, in that case, that's extremely limited because those weapons are really designed to go after surface targets. They don't have much penetration capability. But you see what they did at the various sites, at Esfahan in particular. That storage facility is co-located with the uranium conversion facility, which is one of the key legs of the uranium pathway. So going after all the buildings and structures and facilities up top, take away their ability to do the actual conversion itself. The problem is, like you mentioned, the mountain, which is deep under hard granite and unreachable by conventional munitions, to include the GBU-57.
One of the things you said that you would be able to talk about, I think people are waking up and wondering what could happen in terms of what Iran's response could be, either here in America or at our bases overseas.
Sure. I had the fortunate opportunity to live in Bahrain for almost 4 years, plus multiple deployments and TDYs to the region. So understanding where the locations are and the vulnerabilities that may occur in each. Right now, it's interesting to see what Iran's going to do. As was previously mentioned, it took almost 10 days to respond to the Soleimani strike. They have to make sure that their calculus is correct and they're working up the escalation ladder in a way that they feel is appropriate. But in this case, we struck targets that are inside Iran, conventional high-value targets, and that changes their calculus somewhat. Israel and the U.S. have taken great care, particularly the Israeli efforts to take away the surface-to-air missile sites, the air defense, and then go after the ballistic missiles that can touch them. But one of the things that remains is Iran's military power in the maritime domain. Now, they don't necessarily match up with us force to force, per se, but they've purpose-built their capability to try and keep people out of their territory, to push people away from the Strait of Hormuz, and as mentioned previously, to potentially keep people from going in and out using mines, coastal defense missiles, rockets, etc. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the next 24 to 96 hours and understand what their calculus is as well.
And Captain, they're still doing battle assessments to figure out how much damage we did, but really all we can go off of right now are these Maxar satellite images where you take a look at these different sites and you look at the Fort Dell facility in particular, you just see a bunch of the different holes in the ground and what looks to be maybe like concrete dust blown all over the ground. How do you gauge how successful these strikes were just based off some of those satellite images without being able to get on the ground and get underground and take a look in there physically?
Well, fortunately, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've taken the MOB, the GBU-57, and we've tested it against facilities that are close in structure, comparison, and design to the targets that we would use both in Iran or other countries that have similar facilities. So you take lots of contextual data, scientific data, blast, overpressure, PSI data, and try and extrapolate it and put it into the facilities as you know them to be. So if the weapons did what they were supposed to do, and in this case, the imagery shows 3 extremely precise marks near the upper ventilation shafts that would imply that they did exactly what they were supposed to do, then you can take that data and extrapolate and say, this is what we think the effect would have been inside that mission space, particularly with what we've done with previous testing.
Captain, can I give you just a chance for a last word to comment on the skill, bravery, and courage of the pilots and crew that did the mission?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, this all started back in 2008, and this is a long chain of custody for the people who supported this. It goes to the intel people that developed the targets. It goes to the people who did the logisticians and the planners who put this on paper, and most notably the pilots who had the skill and the deftness to execute what is considered to be one of the most successful joint long strike missions that we've done in the last 20 or 30 years.
Captain, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Captain. Thanks so much.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch up.
All right, let's go to Bloomberg. But before we do that, please help support the work that I do by getting the great supplements that I offer. These are supplements that I take. Everything that I'm telling you, I take, all right? I have a very comprehensive healthcare protocol, right? And, you know, an anti-age, it helps to slow down the aging process and have longevity. A lot of people can't afford everything that I do. So I'm telling you on how to try to target certain systems so you, based on your affordability, so you can slow down the aging process and get healthy, all right? Two of the biggest chronic problems in the United States is diabetes and heart disease. Another one is incidences of cancer, all right? And there's ways to mitigate the risks. Now, it's a holistic approach. You gotta have proper diet, proper exercise. You have to get proper sleep. You have to learn new things, try to reduce your stress levels, have some spirituality or some mindfulness, proper supplementation, filter your water, eat foods that are healthy, stay away from processed foods if you can, cook at home more often. These are all things that you can do that are easy and they have compound effects. And then when you take the right supplementation, when you stack them appropriately, you get the max benefits. So let me give you an example, all right? As we get older, our neural health starts to decline, all right? There are these moments in time with our brain where you start to have decline. On average, asymptomatic decline starts at about age 30. Symptomatic decline starts at about age 50. And then you have further, more rapid decline at about age 65 or 72, depending on how your genetics and your health, all right? So those are the 3 major milestones where neural health starts to decline, all right? So the more that you take care of your body, the less decline will happen when you go through these milestone gates. Now, it's very important to protect your neurons. And because of the crisis that we went through, part of the aftershock is that there's going to be neural decline. Not just the immune system, but neural decline. So what you need to do is you need to start making sure that you detoxify your body. Get proper sleep. And you have to learn new things and talk to people and try to stay in a parasympathetic mode. Now, when you do that, you're slowing down the aging process and you're providing a microenvironment for good neural health. Another part of this is to make sure that you drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods and stay away from sugary foods. And you want to improve your cardiovascular health because you want to get good blood flow to your brain for the microenvironment. Now, with proper supplementation, you can improve the health of the neurons. And I'm going to be talking about this throughout the show. But 2 supplements that you should take for neural protection are NAD+. NAD+ is a supplement that's going to boost up your NAD+ levels. That's going to increase your energy just for any cell in your body. But NAD+ also helps to repair DNA damage, cellular DNA, and mitochondrial DNA. Also, NAD+ helps to protect the neuron. And you stack it with the ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can buy. Most people that take CoQ10, you're taking the wrong type. It's the low bioavailable form. This is the highest level that you can get for bioavailability. So get ubiquinol, which is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. Now what this will do, what ubiquinol will do, is soak up free radicals, reduce stress in the cell, help with the health of the mitochondria, have more energy. And it's going to protect the neurons. Now, when you're protecting your neurons, then you're going to maintain that neuroplasticity. Now, if you are working out, getting better blood flow, activating your different neurons for different exercising activities like resistance training, balancing, and stretching, you're activating that cerebellum and you're helping that cerebellum. And when you're learning new things and you're reading, not on a screen, but in a book, and you're learning and you're training your mind, you're going to improve your thinking, your memory, and also couple that with talking to people, because it's important to activate these different areas of your brain. When you're reading, you're activating a different area of your brain. When you're talking, you're activating a different area of your brain. When you're listening, you're activating a different area of the brain. But if you're only doing one modality, the other areas of the brain start to atrophy. Those neural connections start to recede. You want to build those neural connections, okay? So take NAD+ and ubiquinol together every day. If you're age 40 or older, super important. I can't tell you this enough. In 5 years, you're gonna know a lot of people that have neural problems. In 5 years. So you better start paying attention to me. Because once the neural problems start, it's too late. It's too late. So you're better off protecting than having to deal with damage that's already happened. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. In 5 years, you're going to see a lot of people having tremors. You're going to see a lot of people having gait issues and balancing issues, memory issues. And you're going to start seeing people in 5 years that are going to have this inability to talk. You're going to see a lot of people doing this. And then they'll be fluid and then go, and then be fluid again with their speech. You don't want to go down that road. You do not want to go down that road. But if you don't listen to me and you don't apply this holistic approach, the aftershock is going to affect you. It's coming. There's going to be a lot of people involved. And unfortunately, I don't have a large enough audience to be able to reach out and tell people what to do. But that's, I've done the best that I can. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Holistically improve your health. It can be done. It can be done. And I've been saying this almost every day. But it's coming. 5 years. You're going to see a lot of people having this problem.
Tell us about Michelle Bowman. When she says she could cut rates, does that mean something?
It's interesting because we debated this. She is not known as a monetary policy expert. She's been the banking person on the Fed, and she was recently elevated to vice chair for supervision. for that reason. She has become more outspoken on monetary policy over the past year, but that's not her expertise, and I don't think the board looks to her for guidance. But Chris Waller said something similar a week ago, and he is one of the influencers of the Fed. So there may be some rising interest in July, but it's also important to note that Bowman and Waller are the two members of the Fed who were appointed by Donald Trump, who has made his feelings about interest rates quite clear. And so there's probably a little bit of a political aspect to this as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, Mike, the consensus on this U.S. economy is that, okay, growth is slowing, but nobody's got recession on the table anymore. Inflation seems fine. That seems like they can just sit there. I mean, I don't know.
That's Jay Powell's argument, and most of the board, and we'll hear from Powell tomorrow when he speaks to the House Financial Services Committee, I imagine.
Which we will be taking live.
Yes.
Full,
Or
for 2 hours.
I'll be here to, anyway.
Break it down.
He'll make that case. What seems to be, I think, just to step back, we have to be fair to Bowman and Waller and say that they both said if the data change.
Okay.
In other words, if inflation goes down further or stays about where it is, and if unemployment rises, then they might be willing to do that. Now, unemployment has stayed steady for 2 months. Inflation has started coming back down again, especially when you look at the PCE, which is the Fed's main gauge. But the interesting thing is, Bowman dissented in September from the Fed's 50 basis point rate cut. And at that point, inflation was lower than it is now, and unemployment was lower than it is now. So, not sure what her argument is, what's changed. But this was a speech, so we didn't get a chance to ask her questions about that.
So there was a fun chart making the rounds. I think it was in Mike Wilson's note, talked about spike in oil prices and how they coincide with recession, and we are nowhere near that kind of spike at this point. Is there a corollary in your research to high oil prices and weak economic growth?
Well, it falls into the It falls into the category of, say, the Somme rule of something that has been observed to happen, but isn't always right. Isn't always the case. Same thing with the yield curve inverting. Usually, if you have a big spike in oil prices, that's maintained, not just things that go up for a month in the contracts. It's followed by a recession at some point, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen. Now, we do have conditions maybe setting up for recession with the tariffs. So that's something that the Fed's keeping an eye on. And that was a little bit of Bowman's argument, that she's worried about the unemployment rate starting to rise. She thinks that the labor market is in pretty good balance, but it's not as dynamic as it was. People aren't getting hired anymore. Not getting fired yet, but if they start to do that, then they won't find jobs, and so the Fed will have to respond.
If tariffs introduce inflation into the economy, when do you think we'll see it in the numbers?
Well, Bowman and Waller are putting a lot of weight on the June numbers that we'll get in July. July 15th is the CPI, and the Fed's numbers won't come out till the 30th, which is that day. But the numbers should start to show up in enough categories that you could say we're going to see inflation. And I don't think anybody argues that we're going to see inflation from tariffs. The real argument is about how much and how long it will last. Is this a one-time only thing? Prices go up and then they just stay where they are and are influenced by everything else in the economy. But the hard part is, since Trump keeps delaying things, we don't know when he's going to put what tariffs on what products. Right. So there's a question right there.
Mike, always appreciate it. Mike McKee, Bloomberg National Economics and Policy Correspondent, joining us there. All right, here we have Terry Haynes.
All right, so we're going to play Energy CEO assesses oil prices following Iran strike. This is Fox Business.
Welcome back. Reaction across the world from the U.S. launching Operation Midnight Hammer over the weekend. targeting 3 Iranian nuclear sites with several precision bunker buster strikes. Iran and Israel have been exchanging missile fire this morning. Iran is also threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, a critical energy choke point where 20% of oil flows. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told me he would encourage China to stop Iran from shutting down those operations. Joining now is the chairman and CEO of United Refining Company, Red Apple Group, also Bristides and D'Agostino, she tried to say, supermarkets. John Catsimatidis back with us. John, great to see you. How are you doing? Good to have you this morning.
Thank you for having us.
I want to get your take on oil prices and how you expect prices to move this summer after all of this.
Right now, the oil prices are stable, and they moved. They were down as low as $58, $59 about a couple months ago. And in the last, 10, 15, 20 days, they moved from the low 60s to 74, 75. They're stable this morning. The threats are coming in, but don't forget, 20% of the world's oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz, and a lot of it goes to China, and a lot of it is used by OPEC. I think the threat is just a threat. I don't think anything's going to happen. The prices are stable right now. I believe that once we have peace, you're going to blink your eyes and you're going to see $65 oil.
That's what I'm betting on.
That's what I'm betting on. I mean, it doesn't look like Iran has any card.
I've been telling people this for 2 weeks now. What I view on this is that oil is going to be shocked by whatever happens in the Middle East. It's going to go up and then come back down. And then once it's stabilized, once the patient is stable, all right, what's going to happen is that it's going to slowly start drifting back down to 65. And this is the reason why I said that we're like right now, we're testing the 92.95 barrier. So the 72.95 barrier, $72.95 a barrel. All right, barrier. It's just hovering there, right? It's trading at 73.08. So if it goes below that, if it breaks that support level, then the next major support level is 65. Now, some incident will take place in the Middle East and it'll come back up, break, and maybe start trading at 75, 74. Last night it went as much as 78, but then rapidly went down. So the point here is that most of the traders out there are shorting oil. That's where most of the momentum is, even though there's a price hike. So what happens is that every time there's a shock and the price goes up, the ones that are shorting are just buying more to short. All right? And to get better dollar cost average. So when it starts to come back down, you start making a ton of money. So that's how you play it. But you listen to Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon, they'll tell you to stay at home and drink Slurpees from 7-Eleven because America First pacifist. No, you engage, you find out, you hope for the best, you want to solve the problem, and you want to mitigate your own personal risks. That's what I'm telling you how to do it. I'm telling you how to mitigate personal risk to help to improve your health because of the crap that's in our environment. All right? But I'm also telling you how to mitigate risk on what's happening in the Middle East. And if you've been following what I've been telling you to do, you've made money.
To play anymore after the strike over the weekend, but you do have summer heating gas up. You've got gas prices climbing, so you're going into the busy driving season, of course. What's your expectation for road trips and airline fares, and do you expect oil prices to keep bubbling higher?
I don't think the oil prices will go higher. I think they may come down once Iran has nothing to win. China, they need Iran's oil. They're not going to cut off Iran. Don't forget, China has made a lot of money. China gets the Iranian oil for 30 to 40% discount. They're buying it for nothing.
Wow.
Every time oil goes up, Russia celebrates, the OPEC nations celebrate.
Exactly.
He's
making a great point.
It's
He's
going to be
making a great
stable.
point. And not only that, Trump has the ear of MBS and MBS has the ear of Trump. I am positive they're coordinating. So they're not going to allow the oil to go up too high, because that would be feeding into the war effort for Putin. So it's traders already know this, and it's capped. And every time there's an incident that spikes the price, you short it, and boom, you got money. You made more money. But Stephen Bannon knows better. Really. Stephen Bannon worked for Goldman Sachs, has long hair, scruffy, doesn't want to shave, wants you to slurp on 7-Eleven big gulps, stay at home, be a pacifist, America first. Arrgh. Stephen Bannon.
75, but I believe once there's more stability in the world, they'll go back to between 60 and 65.
You also have to consider the fact that the Saudis are closer to President Trump.
Now, does that sound
Iranians.
like Armageddon, which is being pontificated by Alex Jones, the gonzo journalist? Does it? I don't think so.
And so the Saudis may have put a statement out, which was sort of a statement that, we don't want to see, upset in the region, whatever they said, something like that. But it was a meek statement, and it was clear that the president has a real relationship with the leadership in Saudi. So if there was a need to put more oil on the market, there's that as well. I just want to point that out because it's something that has not been talked about in this whole conversation.
Exactly.
But John, I want to get your take on tomorrow. New Yorkers are heading to the polls for the New York City mayoral primary election. Business leaders raising the red flag about the direction that New York could take if a progressive Democrat socialist is elected. And he's awfully close to Cuomo right now. For a while, Andrew Cuomo was winning, and now it looks like his opponent is coming up real close to him, and he's a socialist. You've warned anti-business policies could force you to shut down Gristini's supermarket.
Well, there's no
I'm telling
point to
you,
run
there
this,
is zero way that New York will survive a socialist. It will literally tank the city, and we're going to go back to pre-Giuliani days. See, we're like been hovering. We're just hovering. It's like we're almost at pre-Giuliani days. You have a socialist, you're going to have such an exodus out of New York, people that have money. And it's just, I don't think that I would stay in New York if that socialist comes into office. But I don't want Cuomo either. It's crazy. This city is run like Gotham in Batman.
If the Z-Man is going to be giving it away in his supermarkets, that was the joke that we've been saying. But the fact is, Bill Clinton endorsed Andrew Cuomo yesterday. That's a big endorsement. And Bloomberg endorsed him. I think the people of New York City are starting to believe that Andrew Cuomo is the best bet for the Democratic Party, other than some of those crazies that are running.
So what kind of policies do you expect to come out of a Cuomo administration in New York City?
Well, Cuomo's still going to be under
the problem with Cuomo, and I know this for a fact because I lived it, all right? At Catholic Charities, all right? Catholic Charities and UJF and some other nonprofits worked with FEMA for the relief effort after the Hurricane Sandy. Now, this was years ago. So for the ones that remember, there was a hurricane that hit New York, all right? And it was pretty bad. Well, FEMA came in and helped with rebuild, especially in some of the upper counties in upstate New York. But also there was a lot of damage in the A zone, flood damage. All right, I was in the A zone when Hurricane Sandy hit. All right, so our building was damaged and all. So FEMA came in, and there were generators that were outside running for months, and it was a living hell. It literally was a living hell. All right, but eventually you just bear with it, and things did get better. But it took, I'm not joking, it took almost a year and a half, 2 years to recover from Hurricane Sandy in the A zone of New York. About 2 years. All right. Now, during that time period, Cuomo was governor. So how FEMA worked, these contracts, they would have a contract with the nonprofits. The nonprofits would have case managers to deal with the ones that were in need. All right. Now, how I know this was because I was managing the portfolio of Catholic Charities, so I knew about and I did the budgeting, so I knew everything about Catholic Charities, everything, all the expenses, the revenues, the portfolio. I knew it all. All right. So I knew all these different programs. So there was a case management program that we're getting funds from FEMA to process cases, especially in Rockland County. All right, that was hit pretty hard, but also cases in New York City. All right, and it was Rockland County and Orange County also was hit. So okay, so there was contracts with FEMA, and so if you had a case manager work on your case, the individual that needed help would show receipts that they were hit by the hurricane and it damaged their home or whatever, lost their job, whatever it was. And then those documents would be filled out with special forms by the case manager, and then FEMA would reimburse to a certain number, a max number, the person in need. All right, millions of dollars were involved in this. All right, but there were about 3 major nonprofits involved. The 2 big ones was Catholic Charities and UJF. All right, now, and then New York Times was also involved in helping to promote, the need, right? To tell the people out there through their case study. They did like these cases, the neediest cases in the New York Times to get donations. Okay. Cuomo started having a budget problem. So going back, you had FEMA making a decision that they're going to work with the nonprofits, and that what would be the criteria for the documentation. It was already set in stone before any checks were issued. Now, how it worked was the nonprofit would use their money first and reimburse they would give the money to the person in need. So if, let's say, the person in need needed $2,000, Catholic Charities or UJF would use their own money and give the $2,000 to them, with the understanding that FEMA was going to reimburse the full amount. All right? And that was happening and happening and happening. All right? Documentation was already established what was needed for the reimbursement from FEMA. And it was happening for months on end. And you go into the second year. And then all of a sudden, Cuomo starts clawing back some of the money that was issued, because FEMA also worked with the state. So there was like state FEMA money and then FEMA money. All right? But Cuomo had a budget problem at the state level and tried to claw back some of the reimbursed monies that went to the nonprofits. That's the kind of fucking asshole that Cuomo is. He's a mobster. He's a mobster, and no one was paying attention to this shit that was happening. So what happened was the people in need did get the money, but the nonprofits ended in not getting the full reimbursement from FEMA because of the clawback. That was Cuomo. Cuomo did that because he was a tough guy. So he acts like a mobster. So you got a socialist and you got a mobster. Which one do you pick? Welcome to Gotham. I bet Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon don't know that.
Thumb of New York State is on Governor Hochul and the Assembly and the State Senate and the City Council. So the mayor of New York has a lot of problems to overcome. That's why Eric Adams, I think, is still viable, because Eric Adams, what I said to Eric Adams is, I
prefer Eric Adams. I way prefer Eric Adams than Cuomo, the mobster, or the socialist. The other guy, the socialist, Z-Man, or whatever the hell his name is. I mean, just fucking A. Just like, and unfortunately, New York is kind of like the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the country. You know, New York's kind of the heartbeat of the country, right? It's where big finance is, right? But if the heart is sclerotic, all right? If the heart isn't pumping correctly, what do? The rest of the country is sick. And we're gonna, and then insult to injury. You gotta remember, Cuomo was kicked out of office, corruption. And now he's gonna become mayor and then reboot his political career and run for president. That's what he's doing. He's gonna run on the Democratic ticket as president of the United States if he can reboot his political career. Thank you, New Yorkers, for bringing a mobster to the White House. Shit.
Washington will. And the intent is that President Trump wants New York to be cleaned up. President Trump wants no crime in New York. He's sent over Tom Homan, and they're cleaning up the streets in New York from the criminals, and the criminals are running scared. So I see good things happening in New York City. You know, God, President Trump, God saved America, saved the free world, and God is going to save New York.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. It does feel better. It feels better to me as well, but I would attribute that to the border being closed.
My concern is that God views New York in a bad light, and an asteroid hits it.
That helps a great deal. But one more thing I want to say, Maria, Canada is our secret weapon. I had the Minister of Energy on my show from Ontario the other day, and Stephen Litchie, and Canada, between Canada and the United States, we are the biggest oil reserves in the world. We make the rest of the world look tiny. And if we work out the right deal and get the right pipelines in from Canada and the United States, we are self-sufficient. We don't need anybody.
President Trump has been trying to do that, by the way. But John, on this policy.
But Biden didn't like the Keystone Pipeline. He preferred windmills and solar panels. And as those windmills are killing the birds and the solar panels get broken up by hailstorms, you have a poor energy policy. Thank you, Democrats. Thank you. Thank you so much for making America great. Rebuild America. That's not what the Biden administration did. It was dismantling America.
Of New York. We're going to know who the Democrat candidate is tomorrow. And do you think that the Democrat candidate likely wins in November?
I think once the Democratic candidate is picked, and I do believe it's going to be Cuomo, and then you have Eric Adams having a big announcement on Thursday, I understand, that I think it's going to be 50-50 between Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo?
Well, I'm
50-50.
I'm voting for Eric Adams because I don't want that mobster Cuomo, and I sure as hell don't want him to reboot his political career. He just looks fishy. He looks fishy. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure that he's sent a lot of people over, over the bridge to swim with the fishies. He's that kind of guy. There's an aura about him that's very kind of like Jimmy Hoffa. You know what I mean? Hi. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin. Multivitamins are very important as a foundational piece for your health protocol. The multivitamins in here are cofactors for enzymatic activity, so your cells perform better. You get the B vitamins, you get vitamin A, vitamin D3, zinc, selenium, manganese, folate, lots of other stuff. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin. Very important. And another foundational piece for your health protocol is a probiotic. Now I have two types. You can get it in the powdered form, or you can get it in the Bitchute form. I prefer the powdered form because I take a lot of different powders, like the collagen and the lignans and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost, right? But take the probiotic every day. By taking it every day, you're bringing down inflammation at the gut level. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. You're going to have better communication between your gut and your liver. You're going to have better communication between your gut and your brain. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to get rid of that brain fog. Your memory will improve. And guess what? When you have proper sleep, you're also detoxifying your central nervous system. Now, with a good gut biome, you're also going to improve your hair, your nails, and your skin. And with a good gut biome, you're improving your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotics as a foundational piece of the health protocol, stack it with the vitamin, the multivitamin. That's a great start. Great start, and you add to it, right? Like some of the other items that I've mentioned and the items that I'll be mentioning shortly. All right, let's listen to Marwan over at Al Jazeera. He never says anything positive about Israel, but yet he's either hiding in France or he hides in the UK. But he's an expert in the Middle East.
The kind like Rubio is infamous for being straitjacket, right? And he just repeats sound bites. In one of the campaigns, even when he was told you are repeating sound bites, he repeated sound bites. The same thing with Hexet, who's new to that thing, and so on. Trump is a whole other, creature. So you don't know if he's playing, you don't know if he's teasing, you don't know if he's actually laughing as he is writing these things, or that he's utterly serious. That, you know what, this was successful bombing of the nuclear sites. The Israelis are talking about regime change. Why not? Yeah. It's not exactly politically incorrect. It's illegal, not politically incorrect.
And as you were saying, the Israelis are talking about regime change, and just today we saw them hitting key Iranian government targets. I mean, they still seem to be going for it.
And worse than that, I am not actually keeping track of each and every location the Israelis are bombing, but I think slightly but surely they're moving away from the military and the nuclear to creating chaos. And that's how you topple a regime. First of all, you create a necessity. People just get fed up. They're not getting their food. They're not getting the schools or hospitals. But then you spread chaos. When you bomb a prison, why bomb a prison in the middle of Tehran? Clearly, there is now slightly but surely an attempt, or there's a policy, there is method to the madness of Israeli bombing. They're taking their time now that they were assisted by the United States. And I think the policy is to spread chaos in Tehran and Iran.
And one wonders that the longer this conflict drags on, the greater the chances are that Israel and the US will go for regime change as their stated open aim.
So here you have a sort of a number of levels to look at this. Level number one is that they are creating a certain atmosphere of normalization. Right? They're normalizing war. they're normalizing violation of international law, and they're normalizing, war per se in terms of not just specific targets, but actually going after a country. This was unheard of. A good number of years, the last 45 years, not one American president will actually give a green light to an Israeli prime minister to bomb Iran, let alone join them in the bombing of Iran. So this is a whole new thing. They're normalizing war, they're normalizing violation of international law. Two, as you said,
Wait a minute. Normalizing war? What the hell was Iran doing with the proxies of the Houthis and the Hezbollah and Hamas? For years, for decades, all my life, not just adulthood life, all my life, Iran has been a terrorist country. All my life. It's time to get the fucking job done and kill the Ayatollah. Very simple. But Stephen Bannon wants to be America first, stay at home and drink your Slurpee. Yeah, America first. We're pacifists. You think that's what George Washington was? You think he was a pacifist? Honestly, I think George Washington, if he listened to Stephen Bannon's podcast, I think George Washington would ride on a white horse over to where he's recording and hang him from a fucking tree.
Because you get power vacuums, don't you, and instability.
The thing is that certainly the Israelis don't care, right? They're not a responsible regional power. They're not a responsible international power. They're not the United States. The United States is supposed to be, for now, 70 years, the guardian of the international order, right? Certainly after the Cold War, it became definitely the sole superpower with responsibilities. Sometimes world policemen, sometimes world enforcers.
Isn't it so amazing how these people on Al Jazeera, they'll talk about all the things that Israel's doing bad, and that everything that Iran's doing is good, and he's living in Paris.
There is a book by the National Security Advisor of Kamala Harris, who was, just from last 4 years. The book came right before then. It's called Losing the Long Game. Losing the Long Game is about America's experiences with 6 interventions in 6 countries attempting regime change. That's in recent memory, right? And he concludes that this is a losing long game, that the United States never benefited and those societies never benefited. There was each and every time they had certain assumptions, made certain presumptions, and each and every time it just didn't work out for them, and things either blocked in their face or things deteriorated into failed states.
Okay, there we'll leave it for the moment. Mara and Bashar, many thanks for joining.
I'll tell you, I'm surprised Israel hasn't blown him up while he was doing a live show. All right. Let's talk about oil for a second here. Oil is trading at 73.77 now. It was testing the 72.95 mark and then popped back up a little bit. So I suspect that it's gonna start trying to test it again to see what would happen. All right, but definitely 72.95 is that 72.95 is a support level at the moment. But if it breaks, then we should see an additional sell-off, assuming nothing, newsworthy happens in the region, and most likely we will see things that are newsworthy. All right, with that, let's go to BBC and listen to what they just posted 26 minutes ago.
You want employees to be able to book their own trips so that you don't have to play travel agent. With Navan, you get the ease of allowing employees to book on their own.
Today was once again another sign that Saturday night strikes by the US in Iran has not changed the pace of this war between Iran and Israel. In the last 12 hours, we had 2 alerts of incoming Iranian ballistic missiles here that sent us down to our bunkers here in Tel Aviv, as many millions of Israelis also went down to the bunkers. Israel says that there were 7 direct hits in the country, including in the south. That footage that you showed earlier in the program, suggesting that some kind of power infrastructure there was hit. There were power outages in the south of the country, and also there were hits in Jerusalem as well, with loud booms over the old city. Meanwhile, Israel has continued to strike relentlessly in Iran. It says it has hit headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That is, of course, the branch of the Iranian Armed Forces. And also, as you said earlier, the Evin prison in Tehran, the most notorious prison there for Iranian political dissidents, and also a prison where journalists and academics are held. They also hit, the Israelis say, a clock in central Tehran on what's called Palestine Square, which counts down to the supposed destruction of Israel by the year 2040. So a very symbolic strike there by the Israelis inside Iran. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to
let's get this straight. Let's get this straight. Iran is such a peaceful nation, but they have a clock in Tehran as the countdown to the destruction of Israel? And we're supposed to believe what Al Jazeera is saying? We're supposed to be a pacifist based on what Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon is saying? They literally have a countdown clock in Iran, the destruction of Israel. That sounds like a peaceful nation. Once Trump gets the balls and decapitates the Ayatollah, or Israel does it, we will actually have peace and prosperity in the world. Iran has to go. The theocratic regime, I mean. And the Iranian people, the secular Iranian people that are highly educated, can rise up and have true democracy. But Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon want you to stay at home. Eat the bonbons. Make sure that you drink your Slurpee at 7-Eleven. Drive your fat ass in your car to Walmart. Get your cheap goods from China. That's America first. America first. That's Stephen Bannon's America first. Driving a Chevy to Walmart. Chevy pickup. Driving to Walmart and stocking up on cheap goods from China. That's America first. From Bannon. All talk, no action. All talk, no action. And when the action comes, you hide. That's his America first. Leaders lead and take action and take risks. But it seems like Stephen Bannon, who used to work at Goldman Sachs, wants to be risk averse. That doesn't sound like a Navy man. I'm telling you, if my grandfather was still alive and he saw what was going on with Stephen Bannon, he would literally go over there, tear off his head, and shit down his fucking throat.
Who is the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, a long-time defense correspondent for that newspaper, and I asked him what sort of level of
Israel and the US before those strikes in Iran on Saturday night.
Do you have Israeli Air Force jets that are...
And Tia, we don't want you to live to be healthy. We want you to be healthy so you can truly live. Live louder, bolder, bigger love and laughter.
Do you have Israeli Air Force jets that are operating over Iran? You have lots of Israeli drones that are now continuously collecting intelligence and surveying and hunting down those rocket launchers and those surface-to-air missile systems. And all of this needs to happen at the same time that those B-2 bombers were making their way. So this had to be carefully orchestrated by General Kurilla of the CENTCOM, the Central Command, who's the U.S. general in charge of this region, and the IDF general staff. So all of that is definitely happening, but you are, to some extent, right that what the Americans wanted from Israel was for those skies to be clear and for there not to be a threat against the B-2 bombers that were going to be making their way. The B-2 bombers, yes, have stealth capabilities, but because of their massive payload that they were carrying, each of them had 2 of those GBU-57 bunker busters. They do fly slower than supersonic F-15s or F-16s. They don't have that capability, and therefore, if they were to come under surface-to-air fire, it could be a risky move for them. So that was definitely something that was very important for the Americans and something that the Israelis put a big focus on in the run-up to that operation.
Yaakov Katz there, former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Well, the Israelis have also hit Fordo, that nuclear site, which was very much the focus of the American bombing on Saturday night. And really, Katrina, now, a lot of the focus is on an amount of enriched uranium, some 400 kilograms of uranium, which is thought to be enriched to 60%. And there are reports that potentially Iran moved that uranium out of Fordo before the strikes on Saturday night as a precaution, perhaps knowing that the Americans would at some stage get into striking that site. And so the fear is what has happened to that uranium, where it is, what the Iranians could do with it, potentially spurred into action, even greater action, because of the strikes from Israel and the Americans into trying to make some kind of dirty bomb. And really, I suppose the success of the entire military operation in Iran might now hinge on that 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. We will continue to bring you all the latest from here in the Middle East, Katrina, but for now, back to you.
Now, the Iranian capital has been hit by an intense new wave of Israeli strikes. The targets included a paramilitary headquarters, a prison, and a university in Tehran. Video footage shows plumes of smoke rising above the Iranian capital, which is largely without power because of Israeli strikes on energy infrastructure. Well, with me now is Baran Tajin from BBC Persia, part of the BBC World Service. Thank you for being with us here. What do we know about what's happening inside Iran today? Obviously, it's very difficult for us to get information from there, restrictions being we can't be on the ground ourselves.
Exactly. Iran doesn't let anyone from BBC Persian to report from Iran or the wider BBC, apart from some occasions. There are a few things that everyone needs to consider. Firstly, some of these targets, including, for example, the Evin prison, are in the middle of residential areas in Tehran. So some of these attacks are also having civilian casualties and injuries. We have seen, my colleagues have seen pictures, videos, or photos from friends or family members who live nearby that kind of confirms that actually there are civilian casualties and there are civilian injuries as a result of these attacks. It goes the same for universities, even some of the military or paramilitary bases. So it's we should remember that. On top of that, we need to remember that unlike Israel, when the attacks come, there are no alarms. So there is no way for ordinary people to find shelter, even if they're wearing.
The future of Iran is a secular society for them to have democracy. But the reality of the situation is the regime, theocratic regime in Iran, needs to be destroyed. And there's going to be collateral damage to do it. And for all my life, Iran is a hub of terror. Not just in the region, not just against Israel, against the whole world. It is time to bury the Ayatollah.
So as a result of that, we are seeing a lot of injuries and some casualties. within Iran or people who are not connected to the military establishment. Even we have had reports of some children being killed in these attacks since they started.
Okay. And the internet blackout as well makes it even more difficult to get information about what you've described there.
Exactly. The internet has been shut down, and then as some people have had patchy connections, sometimes even for minutes. We have seen like messages getting to the recipient in Iran after a couple of days on some occasions. And again, without having journalists from international media on the ground, videos or pictures posted on the internet, on social media, is one of the very few ways for us to get a glimpse inside the country and to see what is happening. And then we have to hand it over to our colleagues in BBC Verify or BBC Persian's digital team, who have become experts in terms of geolocating these videos and authenticating them, making sure that they are where they are claimed to be, and they were shot at the time they were claimed to be. And it's a journalistic effort in order to just confirm some very patchy details, because as you can see, the Iranian state is trying to control information. There are edicts going to newspapers and other media almost every day telling them what they can and can't cover. And because of that, having accurate, up-to-date information about what is happening in Iran, what is happening in different cities and different parts of the country is quite a difficult task. I know there are some restrictions imposed in Israel as well, in terms of, for example, the media are not allowed to confirm the exact location of any missile hits, but it's nothing compared to what we see in Iran.
Now, we do get some information from Israel about what it's doing in Iran, and again, we can't verify that, but it has said that it has hit the Evin prison. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of that, or why that might be a target.
So Evin is the most notorious prison in Iran. It is the place that usually they hold political prisoners, from journalists to academics to intellectuals, to all sorts of political activists who are imprisoned by the judiciary.
Right, there's something breaking here. Qatar is temporarily suspending its air traffic as a precautionary measure. This was posted by Bloomberg 5 minutes ago, and the risk has started to increase in the market. And the VIX is trading at 20.98. Equities is trading at 5,983, and oil is trading at 73.76 right now. And Bitcoin is starting to go down a little bit. The ITO is trading at 20.26 right now.
So holds, normal criminals, murderers and rapists and other sorts of anyone who has done crime. What we know is it seems like 2 wings of the prison were damaged, not the wing where the political prisoners are held. We've been told by prisoners who have called people outside to say that it seems like the wall of the women's wing was also damaged, but the judiciary claims that the situation is under control.
All right, let's go to Al Jazeera here.
To be discussed, but there are questions too about whether or not the president will go, given the fact that he left the G7 meeting in Canada early.
So the NATO summit going ahead on Thursday, Iran is going to be the main topic of discussion there, isn't it?
Well, one would assume that that's the case, given the fact that many of the world's leaders have been involved in trying to de-escalate the situation. We know that the commentary that has been coming from European leaders, for example, is that the best way to de-escalate this is through diplomacy, and the only path to limiting Iran having a nuclear weapon is through diplomacy. But given the escalation that's taken place now in recent days, that has become a task that will be much more challenging to accomplish, which is why this meeting has become so critical.
All right, we're going to play Fox News on this Qatar airspace.
Operation Midnight Hammer was an epic operation that caught Iran completely off guard. As they say, our bomber pilots are now back home in Missouri. And President Trump thanked them in a post last night for a job well done, exclamation point, all caps. We're learning more about the many levels of deception and decoy. It was like a James Bond movie that went into this mission. The real strike force went east toward the heavily fortified nuclear facility at Fordow. Those B-2 bombers dropped a dozen bunker buster bombs on Fordow alone, each weighing 30,000 pounds, and they never once encountered enemy fire. Chief National Correspondent, Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon. I tell you, you just can't stop being wowed by what we pulled off, Jennifer.
An absolutely flawless mission. But Harris, U.S. military forces are now on high alert across the Middle East, expecting an imminent response from Iran. The U.S. Navy actively planning its response should Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy mine the Strait of Hormuz. Few here at the Pentagon think this is over, despite Saturday's flawless military strike on Iran's 3 nuclear facilities, a plan that has been honed and practiced since 2008. U.S. B-2 pilots have been practicing this 37-hour round-trip flight to the Middle East for years. The 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs tested against hardened targets as recently as last year.
This operation underscores the unmatched capable reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this.
125 U.S. warplanes, each B-2 refueled in midair 3 to 4 times each way on the nonstop 18-hour flight from Missouri, an air refueling bridge across the Mediterranean and Middle East. 14 GBU-57 bunker buster bombs among the 75 satellite-guided munitions dropped, and 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away, which stayed in the air 1 hour and 40 minutes, time to drop after the last B-2 struck in Fordow. Captain Todd Sawhill, an intelligence targeting officer focused on this problem for years, was asked whether the Tomahawks could destroy Isfahan and the deep tunnels where the Iranian uranium conversion takes place.
No, in that case, it's extremely limited because those weapons are really designed to go after surface targets that don't have much penetration capability. The problem is, like you mentioned, the mountain, which is deep under hard granite and unreachable by conventional munitions, to include the GBU-57.
Is arguably a tougher target, Harris, than Fordow. The U.S. will be using signals intelligence and other means to sniff for nuclear particles at the sites, along with Israeli human intelligence on the ground to give the final bomb damage assessment, Harris.
Yeah, and the world awaits to see what that will hold. Jennifer, we have breaking news right now, and it's partially on what you were talking about. Qatar's foreign minister now has just announced it is shutting down its airspace to all commercial flights indefinitely. And we know just a few minutes ago that the U.S. issued a shelter-in-place order for Americans in Qatar. What does all of this tell you?
Well, there's very significant intelligence and a warning that Iran could strike at any time, an imminent threat to Qatar. Of course, Qatar is where Al Udeid is. That's the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. Normally, there would be 10,000 U.S. troops stationed there. Last week, we reported that most of the aircraft had been moved from Al Udeid. However, those missiles, cruise, and ballistic short and medium range from Iran would take just a few minutes to reach Qatar. And there's also the possibility of swarming drones. So right now, high alert inside Qatar. We've seen the warnings at the U.S. Embassy as well as at other embassies across Qatar.
I'm so glad you're on with us at this moment, because following a U.S. security alert for U.S. nationals in Qatar out of an abundance of caution, we've recommended that British nationals in Qatar also shelter in place until further notice. So this is ramping up, and What we do know is our military is at the ready. They've been pulling into place for a couple of weeks now, even. Jennifer, thank you very much. Always appreciate your reporting. More on the breaking news out of that region. KT McFarland served as deputy. KT McFarland served as Deputy National Security Advisor during President Trump's first administration. So hitting our troops in that region, Iran has done so many times before, over 200 times under President Biden. It is time we respond. What do you foresee just out of these warnings from Qatar?
Yeah, but Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon want you to just stay at home. Don't get engaged. Don't get on the battlefield. Be a pacifist. America first. No. Fucking kill the Ayatollah. It's really simple. But Stephen Bannon wants to turn it into gonzo journalism because he's butthurt that he's not in the circle of influence around the president.
To retaliate. The question is, how are they going to retaliate and how successful will they be? The most they could do is to try to take out U.S. forces or attack U.S. forces in the region. But as you pointed out,
Bring it on.
We've brought more assets into the region to defend our bases, our people. We've taken civilian dependence out of the region, so to make a smaller target, if you will. And we've also, particularly Israel, has degraded the capability of Iran to have those kind of attacks. So we're ready, but we're expecting to take the blow, but we're ready. I mean, Iran could also go after Israeli facilities in the region or bomb Israel again. But again, their ability to do so has been greatly reduced. We know they're going to do something. The question is what, and would it trigger the response that President Trump has talked about? You know, they've got to all be nervous. I mean, they've shown that Donald Trump has shown that he's not a patsy. He's not going to believe that, oh, well, we want to negotiate. He's going to do what he has to do to protect Americans.
And what I hear you getting at is they have to be really careful when they make this next move. I mean, it's like walking on toothpicks on top to the south. So I have a lot of those little sayings. But look, what you're saying is they've got to try to hit us, but not hit us too hard. I don't know if they can pull that off. Many of their military commanders were taken out by Israel.
And the ones that remain know that if they could be taken out as well. It's pretty clear that Mossad has thoroughly penetrated the Iranian military, the Iranian civilian leadership. And if they try to do something that would, especially something that would cause the loss of American life, they might as well pull the trigger on their own heads. What President Trump was interesting when he's talked about regime change. Now, regime change in the George W. Bush, Barack Obama sense is American Marines go in, we get rid of the guy, we put our own government in, we try to figure out how they should become a modern American democracy. And it's never worked. Didn't work in Afghanistan, didn't work in Iraq, didn't work in Libya. President Trump has said to the Iranian people, look, you should have leaders who make your country great again. It's up to you. Right. And he said consistently throughout his 2 terms.
And this is the point I'm making. We don't need to put boots on the ground. We don't need to do this like George Bush Jr. We're not going into Iran under false pretenses like George Bush Jr. did with Iraq and Afghanistan. It's totally different. But Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones thinks they know it all because they're the tip of the spear. Yeah. America first. Be an isolationist. Yeah. Being an isolationist has never worked out for the United States, ever. If you look at American history. Yeah. Stephen Bannon, the gonzo journalist.
To the people to decide their own country. You decide what kind of a government you want, what leaders you want, how you worship your God.
Exactly.
It's up to you. If you want to do regime change, that's on you, but we might applaud it if you do this in the case of Iran.
So a few minutes ago,
not only would we applaud it, we would benefit from it because there would be world peace in the region. Right? You got to remember, the Ayatollah is the guy is the guy. This terrorism for my whole life. My whole life. The whole duration of my life. World terrorism is because of the Ayatollah. Now, maybe not that Ayatollah, because there have been different Ayatollahs throughout the decades. But the point here is that Iran is a terrorist country because it's run by a theocracy. And it's been predicted for 2,000 years that Stephen Bannon is wrong, Alex Jones is wrong, and that the Ayatollah is going to die.
Was here, he was telling me, and it seems like a point of desperation. We were both agreeing off camera, and then the conversation ensued. He said that they are hiring prisoners coming out of jails in Israel. Iran is doing this, trying to find the angriest among them to see if they can flip them as assets and give them menial tasks, he said. They'll send them, take a picture over here and get a little bit of change for that until they work them up into doing something worse.
That's an act of desperation, right? And the Ayatollah we know is in hiding. He already has decided he's going to be a martyr. He's 86 years old. He's dying of cancer. What a great way to go out. He's already designated 3 people who would be his successors. But you have to wonder what's the conversations they're having within the leadership group of Iran. Because if the generals looking at each other and say, I've had this job for 48 hours now, my predecessor was assassinated.
This is what Trump needs to do. Trump needs to start tweeting on Truth Social and on X that he's going to eliminate the Ayatollah and that he's going to bomb the Ayatollah so bad that the 72 virgins that he's going to see are
people want to make Iran great again. President Trump's offering an opportunity to come to the negotiating table and extend the hand of freedom and peace.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Iran looks for enemies within the countries that it would like to have death of.
Yeah.
KT McFarland, great to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching the Faulkner Focus. Outnumbered after the break.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Don't be like an Alex Jones and don't be like a Stephen Bannon, because they want you and themselves to be a pacifist and sit on the couch. And if you're going to be a pacifist sitting on the couch, then you're going to atrophy. You're going to lose muscle mass and you're going to lose bone density. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the K2, the vitamin K2 and the vitamin D3. Stack them together and do some resistance training. Get off the couch, get engaged, get on the battlefield, and guess what? Get healthy. Go to my store, take the D3, take the K2, do resistance training, take in calcium, you'll get better bone density so you don't atrophy like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones. And oh, by the way, if you take D3 and K2 together, it'll also help to pull some of that calcium depositing around plaque formation in your vascular system and reduce further calcium depositing. Very important for your vascular health. So you don't want it. Does Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones look like they have good cardiovascular health? I don't think so. Please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. Boost up that immune system. And olive leaf extract will help with the vascular system. Now, how does that work? Olive leaf extract brings down inflammation. And when you bring down inflammation, you're actually boosting up your immune system. Because if you're chronically inflamed, it's actually immunosuppressive. In addition, if you're bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And olive leaf extract helps to control your lipid profile, bringing down LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels. Super important. Why? Why is that, Dr. Paul Cottrell? Well, by reducing LDL, you're reducing oxidized LDL. Oxidized LDL leads to further plaque. You don't want that. Don't be a Stephen Bannon and don't be an Alex Jones. Get my olive leaf extract. There's nothing wrong with America First, as long as you lead and you move forward and you're not fearful. There's something seriously wrong with America First if you live in fear and you're not willing to engage. You go towards the fire. You don't run away from it. But Stephen Bannon, he's a pacifist. Alex Jones is a pacifist.
News open because China, as you were just mentioning before I came on, is a big buyer of Iranian oil.
Yes, wow. Well, Brett, you don't seem terribly impressed here. This is interesting to listen to you talk through this, and I want to mention another headline. The Wall Street Journal is now making news here that Iran is moving launchers for possible attacks on U.S. forces. Missile launchers are being moved right now. Laura Sullivan reporting from the Wall Street Journal that the missile launchers are being moved into place for an attack on U.S. forces in the Middle East in response to the attack on 3.
Bring it on. Let's end the game. The Ayatollah needs to be destroyed. Bring it on. But Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones is like, it's gonna be Armageddon. Hide under your bed. Like I said, my grandfather, if he saw this, he would be so pissed off. Now, again, for the ones that don't know, he was a CB during World War II in the Pacific. He killed a lot of people. He knew how to blow up shit, and he knew how to build stuff in the middle of a battlefield.
Before showed, a lot of our service members did suffer pretty traumatic effects from those attacks. You worry the scale of this one might be quite a bit larger. You know, having served on those bases, there are obviously places where our service members can go to be protected against an incoming attack. But an ICBM is a massive weapon, and one that obviously can do a whole lot of damage. And again, Joe, I come back to this point. Why did it happen now? What was done in advance of it to ensure that we got, for instance, service personnel out of the region? Do they all have to be there right now? Do the assets that we have on the ground have to be there right now? And as well, why did we choose only, if we were going to engage in this military operation, to drop bombs against the nuclear sites and not against some of these missile launchers and others that would retaliate against us?
Well, I want to ask you as well about this idea of regime change. And I know that you probably have whiplash in watching this whole story here, because the whole message from the administration and the Pentagon, backed by lawmakers on Capitol Hill, Republicans, this is not about regime change. We are not getting into a wider war. This is about an isolated set of strikes that took place on one night. We are urging Iran not to respond. We all go home and pack up our toys. Then Donald Trump goes to Truth Social. Quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change," he says. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, that's the new one in caps, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MEGA, he writes, make Iran great again. Brett, I asked John Bolton about this last evening. He joined us in our special coverage here. Of course, President Trump's national security advisor in the first administration, widely associated with attacking Iran. His take on regime change. Listen.
And I think regime change has to be the objective, because the Ayatollahs are never going to give up their pursuit of nuclear weapons. They have to be forced out of power. That's the only shot we have at really lasting peace and security in the Middle East. And a strike like this, and potentially others, and certainly Israel's ongoing attacks, can
now with the
disrupt.
markets, because of this news with Qatar, markets are now negative. The S&P 500 is trading at 5,958. VIX is spiked up to 21.90, and oil is now trading above 74. And Bitcoin is now going down, and it's at just hovering at 100,000. All right, BITO is trading at 20.05. So the markets are starting to digest the news and it's getting ready for an attack. That's how I'm reading this. But don't be fearful. See the difference between Stephen Bannon and DrPaulCottrell?
And Stephen Bannon still can't get his shit together with what happened in 2020. It's the USA CP virus. It's the USA CP virus. He just says CCP virus. You ever wonder why that is? You ever wonder? Yeah, America first.
And Trump, riffing here about sort of reckless regime change is really, really alarming. So I don't know where he's going with this, but I can tell you it doesn't end well, and that ultimately it is going to provide Iran greater justification to turn to other countries and say, this isn't about the nuclear weapons. It is truly about changing the government, and that is not going to be a popular theme, including here in Europe.
No. It started with them having a nuclear weapon, and they're a terrorist country run under a theocratic regime. So because they have moving towards nuclear weapons rapidly, and they're terrorists, and they have this desire to set the whole world on fire so the 12th Imam can come in, that's grounds for elimination. America first. Yeah. Don't get involved. Be a pacifist. Brought to you by Stephen Bannon. Stephen Bannon is a bullshit artist. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you're watching my show and you get a little bit tense, maybe a little riled up, you need to bring down those cortisol levels. You know how you do that? Take ashwagandha root. It'll bring down those cortisol levels and bring down that stress level. Also, ashwagandha root helps to control your blood glucose levels. All right? In the United States, a lot of people have high blood glucose counts, and you need to lower it. Take ashwagandha root to do that. Ashwagandha root will bring down that inflammation, so you're helping your vascular system and your immune system. Also, vitamin C. Vitamin C helps with your skin. And with this vitamin C with magnesium, you're helping with your immune system, and the magnesium is helping with your brain function. So if you're America first, all right, if you're MAGA, if you align with the concept of God, country, and family, I highly suggest that you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Why? So you don't look like Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon, who are a bunch of pacifists. Boost up that immune system. Because it seems to be, being a pacifist seems to be infectious. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements I have. Stack them the way I tell you to. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. And if you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift. And believe me, you'll like the gift until supplies last. But we have to not concentrate on Iran attacking our service members in the Middle East. We have to have all this infighting that's going on in MAGA. Because Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones thinks they know better. Tell me, when was being a pacifist the right thing to do in a justified war? Now let's say, how do you define a justified war? Well, I would say that the revolution was a justified war, or the Civil War was a justified war. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan right after 9/11, not so much a justified war. Amazing. All right, let's listen to Fox News.
Less than an hour from now, President Trump expected to meet with his national security team inside of the White House. That as we learn of new warnings from U.S. sources to Fox of an imminent Iranian strike on a U.S. base in Qatar. In fact, it was the very same base that President Trump spoke at during his trip to the Middle East. Now, this is where the United States has its largest air base in the Middle East. And Qatar has closed its airspace until further notice. You can look at the flight radar. There are literally no flights above Qatar right now. And the State Department is instructing all Americans to shelter in place. We are learning more about America's historic strike against Iran in the meantime. And new details are emerging about this weekend, how the U.S. carried out a highly precise airstrike mission that successfully took out 3 of Iran's most important nuclear sites. You've heard them by name: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. And now President Trump is calling for peace.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
The president hailing the mission on Truth Social, writing, quote, "Monumental damage was done to all nuclear sites in Iran as shown by satellite images. Obliteration is an accurate term." And the Pentagon revealing just how unprecedented the mission actually was.
The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time.
This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military.
This is Outnumbered. I'm Kaylee McEnany, here with my co-host Emily Campagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Tudor Dixon, former GOP gubernatorial candidate and host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, and Brian Kilmeade, Fox and Friends co-host, host of the Brian Kilmeade radio show, and host of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade. Well, first, let's go to Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who joins us live from the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Kaylee, significant intelligence warnings focused on Qatar right now, where the U.S. has its largest air base in the Middle East. Concerns that Iran will fire short or medium-range cruise and ballistic missiles or swarming drones at the U.S. base at Al Udeid. Satellite images show that the U.S. moved most of their unhangared aircraft out of Al Udeid last week, but still this could be a tempting target for Iranian retaliation. Embassies across Doha, the capital, have ordered their workers and their employees evacuated, and for those who remain to shelter in place, the threat appears to be imminent. From a technical standpoint, the military part of this operation on Saturday went flawlessly. 7 B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and traveled east, while another 2 traveled west over the Pacific, serving as a decoy. The B-2s can be seen on takeoff and landing, but were so stealth the Iranian air defenses never saw them. 125 U.S. warplanes were involved in the strike, including F-22 and F-35 escorts, 75 precision-guided weapons fired by the U.S. at Iran's 3 nuclear sites.
The 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
The B-2s took off from Missouri at 12:01 a.m. Saturday morning. 18 hours later, 12 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs dropped by 6 B-2 bombers on the main enrichment site in Fordow. A 7th B-2 bomber dropped 2 30,000-pound bombs on the underground uranium enrichment site at Natanz. Lastly, 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away landed at Isfahan. It is much too early to say what the bomb damage assessment at Isfahan, with its hardened tunnels some 600 feet deep, really were. Current and former Pentagon officials think the program was likely set back by 1 to 2 years, but no one knows where the highly enriched uranium actually is. 900 pounds of it, enough for 9 nuclear bombs. It could have been moved or could be buried, we're told. There is little doubt that the U.S. will now face a retaliatory strike from Iran after the U.S. military